Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. We're going to start our open house type meeting tonight. It is the first hour. It's going to be more of an open house instructional type of a meeting tonight. We're going to have posters and handouts, and we're going to have presentations so that everyone has the opportunity to understand what exactly the city is doing going forward, or what we do going to the council to make a decision. So we're going to have our committees first. Okay, Kevin, Layla, are you first?
Sure.
Okay, come on up and I think we're kind of informal the first little bit here, so okay. You could address us however you want.
Sure. Yeah.
Introduce yourself, please, so everyone knows who you are.
You bet. Is this on?
No, it's not.
It's not a pleasure to do it. This.
Yep. Just. Oh,
So. Just. So. Okay.
Yep.
Test. Okay. Yeah, I'm Kevin Blaylock with Blaylock and Partners. We're an architecture firm in Salt Lake City. We've been selected by Harrisville City to help them figure out a city complex. The fire stations for Northview Fire, the police facility, and City Hall. So we put together just a couple of boards here with some project facts kind of down the side. In addition to that, got the same information on just kind of a full handout. Just for clarity, this is kind of phase 2, bigger, larger city campus. The first phase was the Harrisville Public Works project, which is currently under construction, and hoping for construction completion by the end of this year. That does include a second potential phase, vehicle storage building, and a fuel island. So that's shown on the board as well. And the associated phase would be the police city hall facility, taking up about 3.5 acres, building and site improvements. And then kind of at the east side of the property is the proposed Northview Fire District Station number 23. And they occupy about 1 acre of land. So this proposed development still includes about 5 to 5.5 acres left over a city-owned parcel kind of to the north and to the northeast of the development. I'm really just here to answer questions from the public or from any of you. I think that there's more discussion for the city council later on. That's something I thought.
Okay, excellent. Do you have questions?
Yeah, we do have these are some takeaways if the public wants to take them with them.
Okay.
And in addition to that, all the same information we kind of gone through in a little bit more detail as part of the city council agenda.
Anything else? Thank you. Then we have Ms. Keller.
Okay.
Thanks, Mayor. I have a little presentation to kind of go over the financing plan that we had gone through the past couple of years, to go over some of the bonds, to kind of go over some scenarios so the city council knows their options. And obviously there's many options, but these are just some we've identified so far that as we're kind of looking at future capital projects for the city. So if we want to go ahead and maybe go to outstanding debt, so slide 3, we can skip the table of contents. If you click on slideshow and from current slide, there we go. It might make it a little bit bigger in case some of the public has any questions or wants to talk about it. So to date, the city has 2 bonds.
Point of personal privilege, is there a way that we can get it so that everybody can see it? Because everybody on the side can see the screen.
You're gonna have to go over to the other side.
Oh, yeah, if it can be open to where it's on screen and able to be viewed by everybody.
I understand, there really isn't, we would try to do it up here, but it can't be, we've got this one to go this way. This,
Can it be tilted?
then we can't see it up here.
I know, it's just a very,
I understand, it's
they
hard,
have a screen there that I can see.
but that's the screen I use.
I'm just bringing up a point.
I understand, it's the awkward shaped building, no, it's gonna stay like that.
It's very bad.
Well,
Perfect. So the outstanding debt currently is the 2022 bonds that were issued, obviously in the year 2022. These were done for the phase one of the Public Works facility. So if you look at the map there, you can see the Harrisville Public Works portion on that. So that's already been answered. Listen, walking back there. He doesn't need to stand.
okay, we're gonna have to. This is not a regular council meeting, but we're still gonna be civil and have some rules here, so the officer feels like he needs to stand there. You need to respect that.
So in sales and franchise tax revenue bonds, so that was the source of security to issue the first series of bonds. That was the $6 million we initially issued for the first portion of the Public Works facility. In 2023, the discussions began about the additional City Hall Police project, as well as Public Works Facility Phase 2, as well as some road infrastructure that may have been needed to kind of put this and connect a few of the different roads within that area. So we kind of refer to that as project number 2. In 2023, due to rising interest rates and a few other concerns, the city decided that they wanted to go ahead and pull the trigger on $9 million of sales and franchise tax revenue bonds to try to get in front of the rising interest rate environment. Kind of looking back on that, we know that that was a very good move because to date, the city has been earning more interest than they've been spending on that bond. So it has been making them a little bit of money on that just due to PTIP rates and reinvestment rates. Of course, we don't want to talk about that too much because we do have some IRS rules and everything else, but it has been a good choice that they've decided to issue bonds in 23 to try to get in front. The thought at that time was we were going to issue $9 million because of some of the potential grant money coming in from the sale of the land. So we thought combined with the $9 million of bonds, combined with the other sources of funding that were potentially going to come in, that we thought that this amount of money would be sufficient enough to pay for both the City Hall Police Joint Project, Public Works Phase 2, and the road bonds. As we later found out with the inflation costs and everything else, that wasn't going to be sufficient enough. And so that's when we came back over the last few months to talk about a potential lease revenue bond to do the stopgap financing or to finish financing for those projects that we'd identified in 2023. And so that's kind of the little bit of the history and story on those two bonds and where we were at this point. So if we want to go ahead and jump to the next slide. If you click it again, something should, there we go, pop up. So this is just some of the detail on the 2022 bonds. So this was $6 million issued at approximately 3.57% interest rate, 20 years for the Public Works Facility Phase 1. If we go to the next one, it'll give us some detail about 2023. This was the 4.29%, just as a kind of a point of information to the group that PTIP is currently 5.25%, over 5.2. So the district or the city's been earning about 100 basis points of interest arbitrage over what they've issued those bonds. So again, it was insightful to go ahead and move forward at that time. This again was for City Hall, police offices, Public Works Phase 2, and road work associated with that project area. Going to the next slide. Coverage table and sales tax bonds. So one of the reasons or questions we got asked was why are we looking at a lease revenue bond on this next for that financing we talked about earlier? Well, if you kind of remember, as we were using our sales and franchise tax bonds as the collateral for these 2022 and 2023 bonds, we have certain bond covenants. And, as we talked to the city and everything else, we didn't feel comfortable increasing that to 5 million, 4, 5, 6 million because those bond covenants they were not going to look as strong. And we wanted to keep the city in a strong credit rating position. We wanted you to be able to always be able to obtain strong interest rates. But of course, after talking with everyone at the city too, we knew that, potentially we didn't want to put that much pressure on that revenue source. And so that's why we kind of looked more towards the lease revenue bonds that could be paid with anything over, any legally available funds for these projects versus backstopping it with the sales and franchise tax bonds. So I'm not sure if that sounds familiar, if there's any questions from the city council pertaining to that, but that was the reason why we deviated from sales and franchise tax revenue bonds to lease revenue bonds on this last phase that we were looking at. This is just kind of an update based off of city's coverage. But you're probably getting pretty close to putting in 24 numbers. So excellent. So bond options, these are just some scenarios that as we've talked with different people at the city, as we've kind of heard some of the feedback, what are some of the options here that the city has or may want to think about moving forward on this? And so we put together 3 scenarios. Again, we probably could have put 300 on there, but we want to get your feedback. So if there's other scenarios you want us to look at or explore, happy to do that. But I think these will kind of give you a general idea of kind of relative options available. So if we go to scenario number 1. So scenario number 1, you saw the word defease. Defease just basically means pay off. So currently the $9 million, you do have the majority, if not a little bit more in that account right now because it has been earning interest above what it's been accruing. So these bonds, kind of one of the city's preferences when we issue bonds is they want to be able to refinance or pay off these bonds without penalty. And so, taking that into account, we worked with a financing institution here in the state that allowed us flexible call features. So just as a reminder, the call features are, these can be refunded or defeased with 30 days notice with no charge to do that. We just have to give them notice. And so the caveat is it has to be in chronological order. So we'll kind of go over that there with a different slide. But again, they're callable anytime without penalty. So one option is if the city just, at this point said, hey, we want to step back. I don't know. This just really your decision at this point. We just don't want to move forward with this 2023 bond or any of the projects as described. Then based off direction from city and staff, we would work with the city to send in that notification letter to that financing institution, let them know that these bonds are going to be paid back, and we would send those proceeds back to them. Just as again, for your information, we recently closed another transaction a couple weeks ago, probably about a month ago, similar sized. It was a 20-year versus a 25-year. So you would anticipate it closed at about 480, and we got 6 bids on it. Similar call features though. And so if you remember, this bond was priced at a 429. So just know, I mean, I know we're in an interesting situation, but if the city does decide to move forward with paying it off, and then in a year now, 2 years from now, we don't necessarily know what interest rates are going to do over those time, but they have been staying relatively higher. It could potentially put the city into a position where they would be borrowing another bond at a higher interest expense versus what's currently there now. So that's kind of the risk associated with defeasing the bonds early or moving away from the projects at this point. Let's go to scenario number 2. Perfect. So scenario number 2 was one that we put together, potentially the city wants to use. We know that the 9 million is not sufficient enough to do all the projects that we described, but if the city wanted to look at doing projects that they know they could finish, then we could potentially look at finishing the public works phase 2. Based off some of the numbers, we just kind of put in there an estimate there, kind of rounding up to be conservative. So approximately $2 million to finish that. Road project, again, that was just our best guess based on some of the information. So we just put that at $1 million. But you could potentially go ahead and spend $3 million of proceeds from those bonds and then send the other $6 million back. That's an option. So if you wanted to go to the next slide, this would show you what that would look like with your new amortization schedule. So again, these are chronological order. So you'd be paying from the earliest bonds down. And so that's what the new bond would approximately look like if you decide to do that next year and spend 3 million towards your projects and then downsize the bond with anything that's left over. So again, that's an option as well. And then obviously anything in between, right? It could be 3.5 million, 4 million, 2 million, and we can run scenarios depending on what those final numbers look like at the end of the day. But it would be structured like this as you pay down those maturities from the earliest to the latest. Maybe I'll just quick pause right there. Okay. So the nice thing about that would take off some of the debt service requirements. So you'd be just paying those interest accruing on those maturities. And if you did have additional cash, let's say you'd already budgeted 500,000 for that bond payment and you decide to pay it down, we could just keep chipping away at it without penalty. You would just need to give them that notice 30 days prior to submitting a pre-principal payment. So it does give you flexibility and continue. It's just not like a one-time and that's all you get type thing. So moving on to the next slide. Scenario number 3, this is one that we talked about too, based off some of the feedback we heard. General obligation bonds. And so as a reminder, general obligation bonds here in Utah require the vote of the people. What it does is it allows you to implement a property tax each year that would coincide with the debt service of the bonds for each year. And so once those bonds are paid off, that property tax by law has to go away. And so, you know, a lot of people get concerned potentially like, hey, once a property tax goes up, it's never, you know, when are we ever going to see it go down? So, one of the nice caveats with GO bonds is they are the strongest credit rating or source for our city. So you would anticipate that would get you the lowest interest rate compared to sales tax bonds, lease revenue bonds, and those type options as well. As well as the property tax that is collected each year does go away once the bonds pay off or mature. So there are a few benefits to those. The hard part or potentially the tough part is helping the public to understand or support the project in that case, but kind of looking at it from a legal aspect, if you look at your bonding capacity, currently you don't have any general obligation bonds outstanding. Per state law, Harrisville City would be able to incur up to $44 million of general obligation bonds. Of course, we know that's not feasible or reasonable, but you know, if you went to the voters and depending on how much of the 9 million or potentially how much of the project said, hey, you know, we're asking for 10 million, or in this case, we have a couple scenarios. I believe we put a 13 million and a $14 million scenario. So if we go to the next slide, you can kind of see what those impacts would be for the voters. So this would be based off a 20-year term, 25-year term of general obligation bonds. So again, this would be based off, I just pulled it from the prior GO bond election that the city had done, primary residential value roughly $320,000 per residence or per taxable value. So in this case, for a primary residential unit of approximately $320,000, they would anticipate on a $13 million GO bond of a property tax increase of $237.01, or that would, in monthly terms, $19.75 a month of additional property tax increase on their home. Secondary residential doesn't get the exemption of the 45% discount. So similar things, except from removing that exemption. So you're at $430.92 or $35.91 a month for property tax. So that's for 13 million. If you go to the next slide, it's all the same information except for 15 million. Again, I know that property or that project was a little bit of a moving number there. So I just wanted to kind of show you those options. And, you know, as that kind of gets fine tuned, we can show you whatever option you want to see. But those are the numbers that would coincide with the $15 million bond for primary and secondary homes of the same value. And I think that we go down to the next that might be it. Perfect.
Guys have any questions for Marcus?
Yeah, Marcus, you said, I don't understand the 15 million. That's already the 9 we already have.
So I just
6, or you get rid of the 9 and.
So the 13 and the 15 are just totally new bonds. So we said, like, for instance, if you said, we're just gonna send back the 9, but we need $15 million for our project. So this is outside of the 6, this is outside of the 9. I just kind of wanted to show you what the impacts would look like if you're like, hey, we want to pursue the GO bond election route. How much would a $15 million bond look like for that. So kind of taking away. Now, for instance, let's say you said, well, hey, we kind of like scenario 2 where we want to finish up public works and the roads. Obviously, that would be offset from the total project cost. So if you did 3 million for the sales tax and then paid that back and said, hey, now we're just going to look at the city hall and police station, that GO bond may only need to be 8 or 9 or 10. And we can update those numbers to show you what those impacts would be based off that. But those are just kind of standalone, just kind of a, so you know what kind of impacts you would expect on a GO bond of that size.
So Marcus, what is the tax levy rate for the 15 million? Is that the?
Yeah,
Zero.
yeah, so state law requires that you do it based off the max levy. So, you know, even though we know this levy would go down as property values increase over the years, this is the max one. So that's per law what you have to use to show the tax impact, whatever the highest one. So yeah, it'd be approximately 0.0015 and then obviously go down assuming values went up year over year.
Is that just the tax and the city implements, or is it a relationship with all the taxes of the county? So
this would just be a separate tax that mirrors the payments of the GO bond. So that, sorry, I didn't know it's touchscreen. So each year you would have a payment, let's say the GO bond payment's $1 million a year or $900,000 a year. They would submit that payment to Weber County, and that would be added on to your tax bill at the end of the year because they can only levy that tax to pay for the debt service. And so that's kind of, as I mentioned, as that GO bond matures or pays off, by law, they cannot keep that tax. It has to go away. And if they wanted to implement another tax, they would have to come back to the vote of the people.
that's good information, but the question was whether it could be 0.15% of all the taxes were charged by the county, or is it a greater amount? Just what's the city portion of that? The city already has a tax.
Correct. So this would be a new tax on top of whatever the city already charges. So if the city charges you currently, and I'm not sure if you know that number offhand, but let's say the city charges you 0.002 already for everything that you're currently being charged. If the GO bond were to pass, then it would be 0.002 plus 0.0015. And so the total would be 0.0035, just as an example there. So that would just be a separate tax on top of everything that's already being charged by the city, school districts, everything else.
So it's about, sounds like about a 75% increase.
I just
in
use
city tax.
I just use the city, that 0.002 as an example. I don't know what exactly the current city's rate is on their tax.
0.002, and then we get another 0.015.
Well, I'm
The
saying,
numbers are.
yeah, I'm just saying this 0.0015 would be on top of whatever the current rate is. So I don't know what that number is though right now. So I apologize, I don't have that.
It doesn't. I'm still trying to get a firm grasp of whether or not you're comparing it to all of the taxes that the county assesses on my piece of property. Or is it just the taxes that the city assesses?
I believe I can clarify that, Curtis. It is just the taxes of the city goes on your house.
Okay.
Right?
Okay, sorry, I didn't quite understand the question. That's a good question.
If you, in the next half an hour, if you have a question, raise your hand. I'll call on you, but I'd rather do that than having, okay?
And happy to answer any more questions, Mayor. I know there may be questions, concerns, whatever that may be, and we're here to help on anything pertaining to the bonds, anything pertaining to potential GO bonds, financing plan, whatever that may be, that either council or anyone that's called on in the crowd.
Thank you.
I just have a quick question because I don't know. Can somebody give me a quick difference or the differences between the sales and franchise tax bonds and the lease revenue bonds?
Would you like to take that one?
Yeah, that's a great question. Can you hear me okay if I speak towards you? And is that okay if I? Yeah. So sorry, who asked the question? Oh, so I was trying to look at you, sorry, Martin staring at me back here.
Excuse me. Can you tell me your name?
Eric Ingleby.
Thank you.
Perfect, good question. So the sales and franchise tax bonds, whenever you issue a bond here in Utah, In order to do that as a revenue bond, so it's a non-voted revenue bond, it has to have a pledged source of revenue. So when we issue a sales and franchise tax bonds, we're backstopped in by the city's sales tax. So the city promises to the bondholders that they will always be paying these potentially from sales tax, can come from other sources, but if there's ever not enough revenue, the city has to pledge those revenues from sales tax to pay for it. So that's why we call them a sales and franchise or sales tax bond. The lease revenue bond was a little bit different because one of the bond covenants that we have in the sales and franchise tax bond, and can you go back to the coverage requirement? I think this will help. And I apologize, it's kind of small writing there, but it's a little bit of a big graph. If you look at this coverage or this column here, it says bond coverage. So this is the calculation that basically says, this is how much sales tax revenue we produce every year. This is how much our bond payment is for the bonds that we pledge towards it. And so when you divide those two together, in this case, it's approximately 2.46 or 2.5 times coverage as we've references, which anything above 2 times coverage is really good coverage. That's strong. Most investors aren't going to have any concerns about that. So what we looked at when we were looking at the lease revenue bond, potentially, is we said, well, how much additional funding do you need on top of that 9 million to complete the project? Well, we originally looked at it as a sales and franchise tax bond, but if we would have included that, that would have added more debt payments pledged by those revenue sources, which would have driven down your coverage. So basically that means it would have really hurt the credit or the backing of those bonds because it would have been putting too much on the collateral of your sales and franchise tax bonds. And so the lease revenue bond was just a different option at the city, so they didn't have to pledge sales and franchise tax. They actually got to pledge the property as a lease-backed mortgage instead of pledging sales tax. So that's really the only difference is what's being pledged as collateral. In this case, it was your sales and franchise tax bonds, which is a strong source. So usually you expect a little bit lower interest rate doing this versus a lease revenue bond, which just pledges the lease deed of trust or the collateral of the property itself. So that's, I know that's probably a little bit into the weeds, but that's really the only difference. It's what's being pledged as the collateral on each bond type.
How does a lease revenue bond affect every one of us as just a Harrisville resident and our tax?
So
Does it?
well, oh, I'm sorry. Good. And so that was the question is what sources of revenues? And so I know we had a big meeting probably 2 months ago to determine, well, how much can we borrow from this lease revenue bond source? Because you have to pay it back, right? I mean, it's not like you can just magically make up money to come and pay for it. And you really can't say, well, we're going to increase our sales tax rate. You don't have any control over how much sales tax revenue is coming in, right? I mean, that's just based on commercial and everything else. And so when we looked at those numbers, we kind of shown a range. We said, well, what's at least $1 million lease revenue bond payment all the way up to a $10 million lease revenue bond payment. And as we had talked to the city and with staff and everybody else, we kind of determined we felt like that the city had the ability to issue up to, I believe it was that $5 or $6 million mark without having to do potentially property tax increases or as high as they felt. So potentially with the lease revenue bond, if it's issued, if there's not legally available money to pay for it that the city currently has from bond fund balance or from fund balance, then you would have to go to truth and taxation to increase taxes in order to have additional revenues to make those payments. So when we talked to the city about that, we felt like we had enough fund balance to pay off the bulk of it. And that was kind of the consensus as we move forward with the smaller lease revenue bond about a month or so ago. So.
And what entity was going to be paying the lease?
Can you tell me your name?
Oh.
Core against the union. So entity is going to be doing the leasing and where are they getting their funding?
So it's kind of a unique situation, and Brandon, feel free to jump in if I mess this up, but really it's just a technical term when we say lease revenue bonds. So that was when the city created the local building authority. And so really the local building authority of Harrisville City, which in essence is just Harrisville City, just a separate entity in order to make the lease revenue bond work, they lease it to Harrisville. So they just lease it back to the city, and that's required by law. So they lease it, I think it's like for $1 each year. So the payment itself, it comes from Harrisville City. I mean, that's just what it is. The lease itself is not a money-making tool. It's just a legal tool that you have to do in order to do lease revenue bonds here in Utah. So that's where we had created the local building authority, which was just going to lease it back to the city. Once the bonds are paid off, the local building authority deeds it back to the city, and that's it.
So the city's paying the rent.
Correct. The rent is the point payment. Correct.
Guy in the back, the hat. You, yep. Your name.
And maybe this is for you, Mayor, one of the things that's been most recently talked about is lease revenue. What you've talked about is sales and franchise, and then you talked about general obligation, but haven't talked about the lease revenue. Is that still on the table? Is that something you're still gonna talk about?
We're gonna talk about that later in the regular council meeting. This was, do you understand the difference?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
And if this is about the complex, then that's part of how you might fund to do the complex. And I know that, you know, for instance, there's some obligations as the local building authority. So one question is when you're gonna have that open house as the local building authority about, or not the open house, but the public meeting.
So that was last week.
That was held during city council meeting. That was on the city council agenda. Did you close your city council meeting and
It was a
come
public
together
hearing.
as the local building authority, your separate entities?
Yes, we did.
Tell Sarah, it's like, I just thought on your agenda, as a city council, there wasn't a separate agenda for the local building.
Yes, there was on that agenda. It was on the same piece of paper, but there's different items and we did come together. Separated from the city council, when the local building authority took care of that, went back into the.
Michelle, over here, corner.
Okay, okay.
Okay, Michelle Singleton, I was there at that meeting. I don't remember that. Is that when we were asked to go outside?
That's a different form.
Okay, so I'm not sure, I don't remember us ever closing and then reopening. I was there from.
That was not.
I think this was a meeting in April, not June.
Not June?
Yeah, then you were in June, I didn't see you.
So, and it went in April,
That's when
was it,
yeah, it was a couple months ago that we did that.
was that my public open house?
No.
Okay, so that's what he asked me. I just don't remember.
No, he wanted to know if we separated the local building authority agenda from the council.
I thought he was asking, when are you going to hold the open house for the local building?
Public hearing.
A public hearing. I think that's what he asked me.
The local building. authority, not the
No,
city
they
council.
can't, but I didn't remember it happening, so I was fine.
Tell me now, don't.
Well, I believe they held it on the same night as the city council meeting. They designated as the LBA holding the public hearing as part of the agenda. I think you probably would have seen a little bit more of the nuances in the April meeting where they said, okay, we're going to move and open the LBA, put on our LBA hat, and we're voting for this resolution. But they didn't necessarily have to do that for the public hearing. They had that on the agenda item that the LBA is holding a public hearing to receive comment.
But they have to act, especially if the local building authority, not the city council.
We did. We moved to change into an LBA meeting.
Not in April, I'm talking about public hearing you just had in June. You're claiming that that's the public hearing for the LBA. It's the LBA, it's issuing the bonds, not Harrisville City Council.
But we weren't issuing the bonds at that time.
You're not issuing the bonds, but you're having a public hearing about the bonds.
Brandon, go ahead.
Bryan Johnson, serving as bond counsel to the city. So for the public hearing, there's no official action taken. It's a public hearing for the public to share their opinion with respect to the bonds and the project. So it can be held concurrently because it's the city has to authorize any lease revenue bonds. The city and the local building authority can hold a hearing concurrently. When it was time in April, I think it was in April, where the building authority and the city actually had to take action on the bonds or approve bonds. They did in fact separate.
I get that, because they did separate, but they didn't separate in June when they have their separate entity. Many local building authorities have their own agenda. They have a separate meeting. Yes, they can go from one meeting to the other. But I look publicly, they will show that they are the local building authority holding that meeting, not the Harrisville City Council.
Yeah, and there's a separate notice to go with that hearing, it's included in there, that it was a hearing held.
It was a hearing held by the Harrisville City Council. It was in a council meeting, not the local building authority. The local building authority did not hold a hearing.
Well, they held it concurrently, but it's a city,
They just announced themselves as doing that. You're claiming they did it concurrently, but that's where there's gotta be a distinction. Answer me why other cities have, they have a separate meeting, they put out an agenda that tells what they're gonna do. I'm not questioning them. I know what you're saying, oh, they did it together, but you're also claiming that in April, they specifically adjourned as the city council and convened as local building authority. That indicates that they have to operate as the local building authority, not as the city council, because they're not the ones that are going to issue the bonds.
right, yeah, and they needed to do that because they were actually taking action. With respect to the hearing, it's an opportunity for the public to speak, and so, because there's no official action. And that distinction falls away, because it's, either way, it's the city that has to authorize the bonds.
Right, they have to authorize the bonds, it's the local building authority, that's what happened. That's what the code says. Does it not?
Yeah.
That's my point, the local building authority needs to have a total.
Any other questions? Curtis?
Just a clarification, right now, we've already had the $9 million franchise. So, yeah, the sales tax. I want a clarification, are we looking for another 13 to 15 million dollar tax on top of that? Or does that include franchise tax? Sales?
No, and I apologize if that caused confusion, because I was just trying to show some examples here, so I kind of kicked myself, I included anything on the geo bonds. At this point, it may have caused a little bit of headache. So the geo bonds were just separate. So basically, the city said, we don't want any of the sales tax, we're not gonna do the lease revenue bond. That approximately, those two added up together was about 14 to 15 million dollars. And so that's what I was saying, if they decide to move completely away from what they've done in 2023 and what they looked at in 24 for the lease revenue bonds, that's about how much that geo bond would be in order to pay for all those projects that they, looked at with the lease revenue bond and the 2023 sales tax bond. So I just kind of wanted to give an example or conservative estimate of what those property tax impacts would look like. But that 15 and 13 million, if the city did that approach, I'm sure that would be because they reduced or gotten rid of the other two bonds, including the lease revenue bond and the 2023 bond. So it's just kind of showing you as an alternative option or replacement. Sure.
Newsletter, there was an assurance given. I don't know what authorities requested that, but some assurance given that this tax would only be to a certain amount, $6 million. As I recall, newsletter. So we're looking at a total of $15 million between the two now.
Well, I think
Okay, I was just looking at the newsletter. What are you referring to? That you think that there are two?
The lease one, where you authorize 10 million, but there's an indication that you would not actually.
Right.
Well,
Right.
that's the 60 stuff.
Right, so it's just 15 million to the top.
The match, yeah.
So that's where I came with that 15 million geo number. So 9 million plus the 6 million of lease revenue bonds. So 15 million of those two bonds compared to 15 million of geo bonds. How would that look if those decided not to move forward and we decided to look at a geo option instead? So sorry for the confusion. Those are kind of separate, different tracks there.
Jason,
Yeah, just Jason Hadley, question on the 2022-2023 lease bonds that you showed.
The sales tax bonds?
Yeah, sales tax bonds. And I don't know, this might not be a question for you, it might be for the mayor and city council members. But on that,
is that already calculated in to what we're paying tax wise, things like that? So if those are going forward, that would not affect property sales tax or property tax rate, is that correct? Correct. Okay, only the lease revenue bond is the one that would currently affect that $6 million. So those have already been put into budget.
Roger.
So, I mean, I think my confusion that I've had is you're talking 6 million, 9 million, 10 million. And we add all those up and it's 25 million. But now what I'm hearing is really it's not 25 million. We really don't know what we're gonna spend. We're gonna ask 10 million and go back, maybe only spend 7 million. I think as a resident, I'm pretty sure the rest of them are concerned as well, is my taxes suck. And it's horrible. But what's happened in the last 3 years statewide, you know, to have your house go up double in property taxes.
Okay, what's your questions?
My question is, the communication of how it's been given out has been poor. I mean, I've been watching the thing and I'm not dumb. I've done a lot of math in my time. And I'm having a hard time determining how much money are you really talking about going into debt? Now, I'm kind of hearing right now that it's not going to exceed 15 million. Is that the number that we're talking, or is that 25?
That is, and we've been talking about that in the city for over 2 years. So we had initially 6 million for the public works building. We bonded for another 9 million for the public, for the administration and the police. When we got into it 2 years later, we determined that we are not going to build a building without being complete. We're not going to be responsible. So do we need to have a little bit more before we go into this? We looked at that and determined that we could go up to 10 million, but we're not going to do that. We need another 6 million approximately to finish that building off. And that's what we've been talking about the last 2 months, is to take the 9 million up to 15 million to be able to complete this project that we're talking about. Michelle.
Just one question. I'm just a little bit confused. So we took out the 9 million in 2023.
Correct.
We had a bond on the ballot that was voted down in 2023. But they're different bonds.
That was, I believe, in 2022. That was for the rec center bond.
Great.
Not for.
Also talked about a 2022 bond. So there's a 2022 bond,
So
but that wasn't the one that they voted down there.
Correct. So the one that was, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. No, fine.
I was just gonna say, so in 22, there was a $6 million bond for the public works building.
Right.
In 23, there was a $9 million bond for the Harrisville Police and City Hall. Both of those have been approved, and those were they're already in, and nothing's gonna raise for that. Right now, what we're asking is $6 million to finish Harrisville Police Station and the City Hall. So that would total 15 million, no rec center.
So what you're saying is the bond that you were talking about is for the rec center that was being done this year?
There's that brick's gone. That's dead.
That one's on the ballot, it's gonna,
And the rec center was on its own.
Yes.
right,
Okay.
that's the one that got voted on the ballot.
Thank you.
We're gonna stop with questions right now. We're gonna go through some of these questions that were answered. We're gonna answer some of the questions in the public hearing from last time, so that maybe this will answer your questions. If you would go ahead and do that, Jennie. Sure, thank you.
Good evening, council. This might be a little redundant for anyone who's read the newsletter, but these are the most commonly asked questions from the public hearing. The first one was the resolution 24-07 authorizing the issuance of lease revenue bonds by the local building authority and Harrisville City adopted at the May 2024 council meeting proposing to build a recreation facility? The answer is no. The general obligation bond for the issuance of the $6 million recreation facility was voted against during the 2022 election, and the city has made no further inquiry or progress on building a recreation facility since that time. The resolution was issued to authorize lease revenue bonds to complete the proposed public safety and city hall building. Why was the bond advertised at $6 million? The advertisement for the issuance must include the maximum amount of issuance. And the city council has the authority to lower that bond amount when the issuance takes place. For example, we did exactly that. In the 2022 issuance, the city council authorized up to $15 million in sales and franchise tax revenue. We only issued $6 million in 2022. We held off and didn't issue the other additional $9 million until 2023. Was the city council going to issue $10 million more in bonds? No. During the May 2024 budget work session, the city council, along with staff, we talked about the impact that the issuance of the additional bond money would be on a property tax. And we determined that it would be fiscally irresponsible to issue more than $6 million. Why was this issuance of bonds not put on the ballot like the previous 2022 GO obligation bond? I think Marcus has done a pretty good job of explaining why we were doing lease revenue bonds. Just another point of clarification with the 6 million and 9 million that have been issued, the city has been paying those payments the last few years that those were issued under the current budget. I won't go through the history. I think we've touched enough on the history of the issuance of the 2022 and 2023. Was the city council trying to avert the public by issuing lease revenue bonds? No. The city council decided on whether to pursue the additional bond money or reduce the project during our public meetings. We talked about this in our January budget work session. We've talked about it every month since then in our public meeting. And this was the route that the city had determined, or the direction that council had given staff to move. All of these actions were taking place in the public's eye, in the public council meetings, in accordance with the Utah Open Public Meetings Act. Would the issuance of additional bonds require a property tax increase? Very likely. It was difficult for staff to determine what the impact would have been when we didn't have our certified tax rate available for us. That came out in June, and we have determined that we are proposing a 5.25% increase to the property tax to maintain our revenues, but also to address issues that we're facing with public information, our website, being able to get transparency out to our public so that they understand what's going on, in addition to some other staffing issues that the city's come upon recently. The public hearing to receive public comment for the truth in taxation will be held on August 6th at 7 p.m. by this body. What will the additional issuance of any lease revenue bonds pay for? If the council were to move forward with the issuance of the lease revenue bonds, it would cover the cost of the second phase of the public works complex, the city hall, and the public safety facility.
Excuse me. Council, do you have any more questions? We'll be covering this again a little while, but anything right now?
Kevin's kind of saying. Okay, I understand there's a petition that had enough signatures to put the lease revenue on the ballot.
Yes, sir.
Is that way it's gonna go?
We don't know yet because they've got to make a decision on the direction we go.
They're gonna go ahead and.
Okay, one more question.
Gary Singleton. My question is, you've got $9 million in use for this property. And you, in my opinion, have bottled it. And now all of a sudden you want 6 more. I mean, you're like doubling it. I mean, I don't understand why, what bad management or what? And so now you're just throwing more money out thinking maybe this might be enough money to do. That's probably what you were talking when you did 9 million. So
what's your
just a
question?
little bit confused on who's organizing this money on doing estimates on what the project's going to cost.
Yes.
Because I would love to see, this is what the project costs. this is what we need, this is the revenue the city brings in. And that's how I do my budget at my house. And I think that's what you guys need to do. Unless you can explain to me, have you had that?
Yes. Jenny, would you like to say that?
Sure, I'd be happy to answer that. And Jessica, please chime in if there's additional information. When the city issued these bonds in 2022, we had a projection of the cost for the Public Works Phase 1. During the architectural process and before we went out to bid on the project, we quickly realized that $6 million was not going to cover the amount of the inflation based on COVID and the construction costs. So we identified other revenue sources that the city had available to close the gap with the Public Works facility. So we issued $6 million in bonds, but the actual cost of the Public Works building is close to $8 million. We had other revenue that we have earmarked for that project to cover that cost. There wasn't additional revenue earmarked to cover the cost of the gap with the city hall and the police department. We quickly realized that $9 million, because mind you, this issuance of bond money took place in 2022. And so we recognized that the $9 million was no longer going to cover the cost of the police department and the city hall combined right off the bat, but we didn't know how much impact it was going to be. And we kept the council apprised every month of our meetings with the architect and the direction that we were going in our programming phase. And we decided to come back to council before we made any further steps in the process to expend any other funds of the cities to make sure that we were covering the cost of this project. The last thing we wanted to do was start into a building that cost $9 million, find out it costs $15 million and have a half finished building over there. And so we'll get to the staff recommendation later in the regular council meeting on what our recommendation is to move forward, but we did have gaps, the cost of inflation and construction. And as many of you know that are in the construction industry, the prices were higher and are higher than they've ever been historically. And that's what we're faced. And we're not alone. Any city doing any project, they're finding their projects are 30 to 40% more right now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're gonna have a quick 5-minute break before we start our council meeting, so go ahead. All right, 7 o'clock, we're gonna start our council meeting for Harrisville City, July 9th, 2024. We are Michelle Tait, and welcome here tonight. We are going to excuse Councilmember Steve Weiss, who's out of town this evening. We have an opening ceremony and pledge of allegiance by Councilmember Jackson.
Please repeat after me, the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Father in heaven, we come before thee at this time, we're deeply grateful for the opportunity to assemble as citizens of Harrisville. Grateful for the city. We love it, care deeply about it. We ask thy spirit to be in attendance with us as we listen to the public and make decisions, voices on behalf of the city. We ask you to bless our employees, police officers, public works, do their duties to help make Harrisville a better and safer community. Again, we invoke thy spirit to be with us this night and say these things, do so in Jesus' name, amen.
Moving on to our consent items. Approval of meeting minutes for June 11th, 2024. And city council had let's review those. Any changes? Do I have a motion?
Make a motion to approve meeting minutes for June 11th, 2024. Has been done.
And second. Motion is second.
Bye.
Item number 4, we have recognition. We had Bill Smith, would you come up here, please? Bill has been serving on the planning commission for quite a few years. And he is rotating on. He served from 2024 to 2014 to 2018, and then from 2019, 2024 experience. So we have this book for you. And your planning commission, yeah, I'm sure you'll take good care of that. And thank you so much for your service. We appreciate it.
Very good.
Yeah. Wish you all the best in whatever you do going forward. All right, on our business items. We have a guest tonight, affordable housing discussion with Mr. Jason Harris. We put you first on their agenda. I'd like to come up and, are you good? Do you need a minute?
I'm happy.
All right, come on. I'm gonna introduce who you are and why you're here.
And is it something, can I plug in or can I cast? Yeah, so my name is Jason Harris. I am with Fieldstone Homes. And I was in a conversation with Mayor Tait and your city administrator, Jennie. And we were talking about a different project altogether, but just some involvement that I've had in just the housing discussion in general. We just got chatting is really what it came down to. And I shared with them some information about housing and some things that I've learned that I think are just helpful for people to know, cities to understand. And I wasn't expecting a crowd here, so this is going to be kind of fun. But I'm gonna pull up a simple presentation that I'm going to use as we talk. And I feel like this is the single most important I guess, topic that we're faced with in Utah right now. And it's this topic of housing. There's one thing that seems to be very consistent, right, in terms of this discussion around housing, and that is that our sense of belonging, our sense of success comes from this idea of the American dream and home ownership in particular. And within that, right, is this idea that that is where community is made, and I feel that, and the greatest thing I ever did was to buy my first home. I used this picture to kind of start off this discussion because this is a common picture that we see on a lot of our parents and grandparents' mansions. I'm personally one of 7 kids, so. You can just look at me and say, you're the problem, Jason. Your parents were crazy. But when we talk about housing, we talk about homeownership and places for our families. It is actually well known now that when it comes to our housing situation, 4 out of 5 Utah households cannot afford the median home price. And along the Wasatch Front, that is about $550,000, right? To help kind of sort of illustrate, set the stage for what we're going to talk about here, right? I like to use this graph because it brings together the 2 most simple pieces of information that really get to the root of what's going on. So the red line, right, that is our median home sale price over the last 40 years. So starting from 1980 to current. And it basically starts at about $62,000 was the median home price in 1980 to today, which is just a little over $550,000. And it's grown exponentially. Now, income, household, right? The average household income also has grown, just not as much, right? Not even close. So the median home price has gone up 790% during that same period of time. When we then
overlay the information in terms of, okay, well, what does that just look like as it relates to all of the factors, which is down payment, 30-year fixed mortgage at the time. Each year as we go along, we create what we call an affordability index. And this is just quick. I won't go into any more statistics or any more information after this, okay? So I don't want to bore you, but you look at the two blue lines, right? Where we're at today is the exact same affordability that we had in 1982, right? And in 1982, most of us know what the interest rates were, right? 15, 16%. But home prices were much, much less. That's the same equivalent to what we have today, which is 6.5% interest rates at $550,000 average home prices. That's how unaffordable we are. And so when we talk about what it feels like when the American dream is to own a home and you can't, right now, the big shift or the big change in the market is actually failure. Those who cannot afford to buy, they used to be mad. What we're seeing now is that they just feel like they've failed. And what I want to talk to you about are tools. So when I get up in the morning, right, these glasses on my head, these are my tool to the day. When I take them off, right, and when I wake up in my bedroom, I can see the dresser in front of me, right? I can see where the door is. I can see for the most part my pathway around, but when I put my glasses on, clarity comes to me. And the reason why I want to describe that tool to you and what we're going to do here is because it's not what we're talking about. Nobody's wrong about how we're talking about housing. I just want to bring to you something that will provide the clarity about one of the solutions to housing, what I feel like is the biggest solution. So with that, I'm gonna use a case study, and this is an actual Fieldstone Homes community that is not anywhere near here, so nobody needs to be offended, right, by what I'm going to talk about. This is actually a project. Well, maybe I shouldn't even tell you. Spanish Fork City is where this project is, and this is a 30-acre lot subdivision that we paved a few months back. We have gone vertical. Our model home is framed. We've got several other homes under construction. And why I tell you that is because what I want to get to you is that a lot of times we are not talking about the actual economics of how to solve the problem. Usually at the state level, in fact, which I'm involved there and in those conversations, they're just talking about what could we mandate? What could we tell the locals? What can we tell the local cities what to do to go solve this problem? But none of them have done the math. That's the most baffling thing to me when we talk about the problem of housing. So I'm going to do the math for you. We used our actual pro forma here, and I'm going to share with you some of our numbers. But in this case, we have a 30-acre lot subdivision, which feels like everybody feels like, well, that's the minimum when it comes to lot size, right? And I'm going to do something very scary. So brace yourselves. This 30-acre lot, these are, in this subdivision, this is my average lot frontage, 115-foot frontages with 15,000 square foot lot width. And you ready? I'm going to draw a line down the middle. Now, I'm taking this 15,000 square foot lot and I'm turning it into a 7,500 square foot lot. The important thing that you need to understand is I'm taking the fixed cost in this particular pro forma. In this case, I'm not changing how much frontage I'm putting into the streets, and I'm cutting the price of the land in half. Okay. And I am adding back into the cost structure one thing, which is the additional lot, right? I'm adding in the laterals, right? I got to add in one more water, one more sewer lateral. I've got to add in the power, stubs and those sorts of things, right? Well, that's about $15,000 per additional lot, right? But I've cut in half all of the land costs. Now, why is that important? Well, when we get to the, and also, I need to also admit real quick that I have at one point in time, I'm a criminal. I lived on a 7,500 square foot lot. I haven't been convicted yet, but that has been a challenge, right? But I've basically taken, this is my home footprint, right? Trampoline. And what you'll see is I can still fit all that. The biggest argument when we say, hey, we want to do a smaller lot, is that the quality of life is going to diminish greatly. But I feel like my quality of life was just as good. And all of my neighbors seem to be having a good quality of life. And I share that because that is the most common challenge, misconception to a smaller lot. Now, the economics. So when we run this through the pro forma, currently in our community in Spanish Fork, we've gone out for sale at our average sales price on these 3rd-acre lots, right? Which is very common for a 3rd-acre lot subdivision, is $833,000. The average home size, we as builders, we always think in terms of above grade square footage, but never put in our numbers the basement. So these homes are actually bigger than 2,600 square feet. It's really actually a 3,500 square foot. But that's the above grade square footage. That $833,000 home, when I fix, and again, this is the crux of what I want to share with you. When I fix the cost of the land, I can build the same home, but I can now offer it for $663,000. So a lot of times people will come to the builder and they say, well, will you just not put granite? Just don't let them put granite, make them do Formica countertops. And will you, instead of double vanities, just limit the homeowner to a single vanity. We can save anywhere from $10,000 to $15,000 worth of cost by just kind of nickel and diming the home down. Well, $10,000 or $15,000 worth of savings on an $833,000 home, what is that, like $1.50 a month in your house payment? The challenge that we have in the graph that I shared with you earlier is that we need not tens of thousands, but we actually need hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of cost savings in a home in order to get not even to this $663,000 is not affordable. This is maybe attainable at this point, right? And after we isolate the land, right, which is the big rock, it's the biggest piece of the cost stack. When we look at everything that goes into building a home, it is the single biggest piece of the pie. And then so we save $170,000 for that homeowner in this particular case. If I then reduce the square footage of the home, right? And I go to a 1,900 finished square foot home, which is a 3-bedroom, 2.5-bath home. I can now offer that same, I can offer a home on that new lot, that 7,500 square foot lot for $573,000, which gets me really close to the median home price. Still not affordable, but definitely more attainable. Which is a $260,000 savings, right? So when we start talking and we're trying to solve for how do we help in our housing challenge, right? One of the challenges, and this is me, I don't know that my other builder friends will agree with me on this, right? And I think that some at the state legislature will probably don't agree with me on this. And that is mandating that you just upzone everything, I don't think is the solution. And the reason why is my job, I'm the vice president of land acquisitions for Fieldstone Homes. My job is to negotiate land, right? When you just go out and you blanket and you upzone, the land goes with it, the land price. So what I'm talking about, what I'm trying to help illustrate here is that when you fix the land price, so when I went into Spanish Fork City and said, hey, like I know my cost of my land, I want to do smaller lots. Well, you may not be surprised at this. I didn't like it, but they said, hell no. No, we don't want those small lots. We don't want those people in our city. But I'm baffled, right? But that was their response. When we did the math, right, we could affect twice as many families in this scenario and save them $260,000 off the mortgage and by doing this. So I guess I'm presenting to you or offering to you as the tool, as putting the glasses on here, as you start to view decision-making as it relates to land use going forward. It's to not be so concerned about density as it is, what is that home sale price that our community needs? And when a builder or a developer or a landowner comes in, right? You say, hey, what will it take? What will it take? Like if we had our standard zoning, right? And you're gonna go off of these really fancy, expensive homes, what would it take to just take us down a little bit? Right now, I'm working with both Lehigh City. I made this presentation to several cities, but Lehigh City and Eagle Mountain City have both, like I said, hey, whoa, like, seriously, like we can affect the price of a home by this much. And we're working on a ordinance in both of those cities to help them have the ability to do this sort of thing. And it's gonna take, in the short term, it's gonna take deed restrictive, right? Like, one of the big questions will be, well, you're the builder, right? You guys are greedy, you're just gonna go take all the upside, right? But my position is, okay, if that's your real concern, then what do you wanna do about it? Because I'm willing, right? And they started talking about, well, let's deed restrict. And I said, as long as it's a short-term thing, right? As soon as supply gets up, we don't have this problem. We have a long way to go before supply gets there. So that is an opportunity. It's a tool that you have. You as a city council, you hold the power to land use decision-making, which means you get to decide the quantity and the type of housing that goes on the land. I'm the builder. I just get to manufacture what you say I can build on. Together, we can affect the price of housing like this. And whether it's Fieldstone, I'm not here advocating for a piece of land, right? I'm just here to share with you something that I've learned and that we're trying to have a positive effect in other areas of the state. And this is going to take me a long time to go to the city council, but I'm willing to do it. Like, I'm willing to share. So, do you have any questions? Like, what comes to mind when you see this type of savings when it comes to home ownership and opportunity for your community, and how can I help?
This reminds me of going down through New Orleans and seeing the long houses. Yeah. And I think they did that for purpose, because of land. So if we're looking at something like this, what does it do in density? I know there's obviously more people in the subdivision, and it works in some places and doesn't others.
Yes.
I've had people come to me and say, can I build a house in my backyard for my children? It's the difference.
What's the difference?
Sorry, are your homes, zero lot line? When the side of the house is on the property line?
No. And now those are tools, right, to create zero lot line. In a case like when we look at just large lot subdivision, right, of this 30-acre lot scenario, we're talking about traditional side yard setbacks. And like you can see in the when I overlay my own home footprint, this is a 5-bedroom, 3.5-bath home, right? Like there's plenty of room for the house to fit on the lot, but it's different, right? And you tell me, is different no, or is different no? Like maybe that's something that we ought to think about, because we're in a different environment. Utah's been discovered. Not only by I've got some other things I can share, but we'll skip past that. Not only by the people who are already born, right, who want to stay here, but there are people coming here. There's lots of great jobs, there's opportunity, and it's just the reality of where we're at. our families are worth it, I believe. And I think homeownership is something that is worth the discussion, because if we can make it attainable for people to buy, or corporations will find other ways to create housing for us. And I don't think that's the right solution. So it's just something to think about. What are the questions?
Seeing some communities, mostly in Salt Lake County, that are got to go ahead for all these projects, subdivisions, but turns into a staring contest between the developers and the city of what's in the infrastructure, like water tanks, like that. Somebody's got to pay for that, or doesn't go ahead. It's people like us are looking after the city's dollar. Developers don't want to specifically work out the extra money because that cuts into their profit market. So are you seeing that problem work? You're working?
Okay, infrastructure, yes, always a challenge, always a discussion. More often than not, right, the infrastructure and the way city codes are written, it is put on the back of the developer to solve, right? And that, but the bottom line is that gets added into the cost, right, of whatever it takes to build at the end of the day. So this project that I showed you in Spanish Fort, it actually, between us, DR Horton, so Fieldstone, DR Horton, and a couple other landowners, we put in over a mile of offsite. So that's actually baked into these numbers already. Well, we're forced to solve those problems on a regular basis. And that's why I say, why I sort of bring to you the numbers, because that is, like, we can theoretically talk about how to solve the problem. What I'm saying is take it one step further and say, hey, builder, developer, right? Like, we need to get to this price point. What will it take? It's a different approach. And it actually is one that takes collaboration, right? Where we normally get up, and this is such an interesting environment, isn't it? The way we come and we ask for project approval is, it's almost like the judge and plaintiff setup, right? Here we have, you sit on a stage, right? We come up, we approach and we kind of plead our case, right? Because the authority isn't with us. The authority is with you. And what I'm saying is there a way to break that barrier down and create more of a collaborative discussion about not the fear of density, but what does it take to get to the housing need that we have right now, so that more families can be in homes. That's really, if we can start with that, we'll get a lot further.
So our friends at the legislature recently letting us know that we don't fix it, they're going to step in and fix it for us. Is this kind of what you're doing to meet the criteria for what the state pictures that us folks ought to be doing in the smaller communities?
Well, okay, great question. There's so many discussions happening at the state. There is a lot of buzz about, they don't believe that local councils, right, are going to act quickly, right? But because the problem, as you can see by the graph, right, the problem actually happened years ago. When you see exponential growth in price, that means the constraint happened 2 decades ago, right? And we just have never caught up. So to answer your question, what they're really looking for, from what I can tell, is for councils to look at information like this and say, actually, we're going to just act. And we're going to start doing these things. So the model ordinance that I'm writing right now in Lehigh City actually still gives the city council, if you read it, you'd be like, oh boy, we have all control still. What it does is it puts an ordinance in your city that you can now use that discretion to be more flexible. Because a lot of times you're just dealing with really rigid zoning rules that don't have the flexibility to figure out how to get to this model where you're actually creating more housing. That's what I believe that's what the state really wants to see you do. It's just not happening.
Jason,
Yes,
I'm
please.
sorry. When we talk about density, you know, everyone else thinks about, well, putting more people in a smaller space and crime and everything, that's what counts. And those are not necessarily the things that, we should focus on all the time. I think what interests me about your presentation is you showed us what the pros were to some of this and what the benefits to the city by having 2 lots on that single space. Elaborate on that.
Oh, yeah, thank you for reminding me of that because that's such an important part of this. So when you go to, I'll go back to that. If I go back to that slide. With a lot. This, right?
Yes.
And we look at the frontage of this lot, this is still a 60-foot right of way, right? And what it actually means is when you take that home value, and in this case, remember, that lot I have, and so I'm gonna talk about there's 3 benefits to this style that everybody benefits from, okay? So the first one is the homeowner benefits, right? And we can benefit anywhere from $170,000 to $260,000 of benefit, which is massive, right? Well, let's take the low end of that. Let's take the $573,000 price point home. Well, if I put 2 of those on here, how much value is now taxable value on that one lot that was $833,000 of taxable value? Right? I now have about $1.1 million worth of taxable value. Okay, so I just increased my taxes that I can collect per acre, and my infrastructure along the frontage per unit, right? That infrastructure stayed the same, but you as the city inherit the cost of the ongoing future infrastructure costs, right? So now you're collecting more money. Your infrastructure costs did not go up. The homeowner, right, they just saved $260,000 on the price of the home. And the builder, we got to build more homes, which that means I just created twice as many jobs, right? Because I built twice as many homes. And like, so it really is a win-win-win when we look at the overall benefits.
I grew up back east in a row home. My address was 1732 and 1/2.
Right.
And so I didn't have a home. There were 16 homes in the city block. And I moved there from a 1-acre home out of Hope. And I don't think my life was any worse and crime was not bad. I have no problem with density and making things work.
So, I appreciate you saying that because that's the same story I get with most people when you say, hey, what was your first home? Right? And what was the 4 homes before that looked like? Because I can tell you that's how mine went, right? My first home was a garden level condo, 1 bedroom, right downtown that I bought for $60,000, right? And the second home was a 1-car garage house, which I'm not even allowed to do that in most cities. I have to build a 2-car garage, right? And my third home, because I couldn't afford I moved from Springville and I moved back to Salt Lake. I couldn't afford a Salt Lake price home, so I bought a town home with a carport. And I wasn't convicted of an actual crime in any one of those transactions. But I do today. I live in a home with 3-car garage. That's cool, right? But I would not have gotten there without buying that first condo, which was not sexy. And it was downtown. I had no parking assigned to it. I had to find my on-street parking. So you're exactly right. We've all been there. And it's not the end of the world to produce housing that gives us those opportunities. And we continue to create mobility opportunities for our communities. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Jason. I thought this was very thought-provoking, very needed in a time like this when we are getting so much feedback from the legislature on what we need to do to increase housing. So
it's my pleasure. Thank you very much. I really appreciate your time. If you ever have questions, like Phil Stone will open up to you. Phil Stone will share with you whatever we know. because that's how important this is. And I believe in local government. I really do. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving on. Moving on to discussion possible action to adopt the Harrisville Ordinance 558, which is an ordinance adopting a master development agreement for Oak Hollow Subdivision located at approximately 265 Larsen Lane. Attorney Brody.
Mayor, Council, you certainly should be aware of this development. Procedurally, why we're here, and forgive me, I don't have the dates off the top of my head, but this council passed ordinance approving this through basically a cluster development type subdivision plan. That plan was challenged administratively by a couple different citizens, and the administrative, essentially the administrative law judge, came back and said that, quite frankly, it wasn't a development agreement, as we kind of put it out there that it was, and it didn't comply strictly with the cluster subdivision ordinance. So he basically kind of left it in limbo and said, no, it doesn't approve it. It's not approved strictly through the current zone, and it wasn't approved as a development agreement. We talked with the developer, talking amongst staff. Utah code allows a development agreement to control as long as it goes through the same legislative process. The decision was made in conjunction with the developer to essentially start this agreement over, sending it back to Planning Commission where a public hearing was held. Planning Commission approved that unanimously to send it to council for adoption of solely the development. That's where we are. There's been no changes to the substance of the agreement. There's been no changes to what the developers are planning to build. It remains all in essence of what you already approved. We just basically had to go back and do it and follow the legislative process that's been crafted for cities to follow. If there's any questions about that, certainly here to answer them.
Council.
The developer. So there were some concerns, still are, now you've addressed the pickleball court situation and made a concessions. There's some other concerns that you've been made aware of. There any wiggle room there?
Thanks, Paul. The pickleball courts, some residents expressed concerns that they were too close to their residences. And so we've relocated those further away from those residences. The residents were very happy about that. There are a couple of residents who had concerns about that. If you'll ask me specifically about the other concerns, I will be happy to address those individually.
See the backyard borders, things like that.
We have not changed the layout of the lots. The lot sizes has not changed at all. We've left all the lot sizes the same. I don't know that we can address those specifically without, doing some major revisions in the layout of the subdivision. We felt like if the council approved the subdivision as was laid out originally as a cluster development, we actually considered, we felt like we had the opportunity to increase the number of lots. We decided not to do that. We figured that it was better to try to keep the subdivision and the design of the subdivision similar to the way it was as a cluster subdivision, which you unanimously approved. And so we just didn't make any changes because of that. There were a couple of other concerns that I'll address just kind of individually. There were some concerns expressed by the neighbors about not wanting to interfere with irrigation watering. We've made a commitment to not interfere with their irrigation water. The second phase of the subdivision is in an area where the irrigation canal flows through. And we will make sure and stage that either after
the watering season is over. Or we will make some accommodations, or we won't interfere with any of the present irrigation folks. And we've made some other revisions to that, just through the public work, through the approval process with the planning commission. And those are just things like easement and things like that. And those are the only other changes that we've made to this project.
Changed then till now.
Correct. Any other questions that I can answer?
Thank you. Staff have any more to add?
Unless if there's any questions.
If none, are you ready to make a motion?
I guess the only thing I had, and I know you've talked about this and gone through it, was density as far as backyards to neighboring private properties. I think that's the only concern I think that I've been. And I know that would rearrange. How many, once again, remind me how many lots are in this subdivision?
There are 30 lots of subdivision. According to the cluster development, we could actually probably put closer to 36. And so we're not even submitting what would be allowed under a cluster subdivision.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Okay.
Waiting for the motion.
I am.
We're going to need to say something.
Did.
I'd like to make the motion to adopt Harrisville Ordinance 558. As subdivision located approximately 265 Larsen Lane.
Sorry, will you read the language on the agenda, please, to adopt the master development agreement, please?
Okay. Okay, ordinance 558. Sorry, I skipped a line. So developing the action or to adopt ordinance 558. Do you want me to say the rest of it again, please? And an ordinance adopting a master development agreement for Oak Hollow Subdivision located approximately 265 Larsen Lane.
I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. This is a roll call. Councilmember Williamson.
Yes.
Councilmember Jackson.
Yeah.
Councilmember Christensen.
Yes.
Councilmember Boston.
Yes.
That is unanimous. Thank you. All right, item number C is a selection pack discussion. This is brought down in Parks Director. Right.
Thank you, Mayor, Evening Council. Hope you had a chance to read through my memos. Basically, just a recommendation and proposal possibly adjust the splash pad operation hours. Since it's been open, so we have had some public comment and question as far as why they're not open Sunday. And then we've gone back and forth on hours a little bit over the last few years. So I feel like with the staff we have now, we can, if you would like, open the splash pad back to Memorial Day through Labor Day, Monday through Sunday, and begin at 10 a.m. and end at 8 p.m. without, with minimal effort on staff, as we already have people on call through the weekend, and minimal monetary. It would cost very much to do that. So just looking for direction, something we can do if you'd like to.
What would be this?
About $860 to do that. That would be a high end.
And what were the barriers before? I wasn't.
So we adjusted, we closed the splash pad on Mondays during the drought. We adjusted the days of operation. We've done that due to staffing issues, being able to come in and checks. We've done a few times over the last few years.
But right now.
So no barriers, if the splash pad is operating as it should.
Any questions or any? We need to, he needs direction, then you need to advise him. Yeah. I would propose that you move forward and keep it up in 20% and those hours. Okay, thank you. Do I need to roll? I don't need a roll call, but do I need an action form? Three have got it on. Yes.
Over.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, item D, this is a 750 West City Complex discussion led by Jennie Knight.
Thank you, Mayor. I think we kind of briefly touched on the history of where we're at with the 750 West complex. We have the architect here. He's got a short presentation for you to bring you up to speed on what that programming cycle looks like, and where we're at as far as design. Soon as I can.
Thank you. Hello, City Council and Mayor. Just a reminder, Captain Blaylock Partners. I neglected to mention earlier that about 85% of our work is kind of public sector stuff. So most of our projects are police, courts, city hall, libraries, fire stations. We live squarely in the public realm. Next slide, please. And so I just wanted to kind of share with all of you a little bit about our process that kind of led up to tonight's meeting. I think you're engaged with this project formally at last November 2023. And our first step is kind of a lot of research and a lot of homework. And I feel like I should apologize to the public because some of this information I think that we're talking about now might have helped answer some of their questions as well. Hindsight what it is. Anyway, this is the current police city hall facility, both the kind of street view and aerial view. The next slide just identifies at a very high level, we made some observations about this facility in terms of today's building standards, the function that's needed for both police and city hall. We kind of separated those out into two categories: functional deficiencies and physical deficiencies. These are also identified on the board and on the handout that you guys have and the public have as well. So there's, in a nutshell, there's sort of a lack of space, not enough room for growth. We're not meeting some state mandated standards in terms of record and file storage and keeping. Not because of our physical constraints, we're not able to kind of handle and process police evidence appropriately. And then some of the physical deficiencies. To talk a little bit about what it means to design and construct a building to a category called an essential facility. And just in a high level view, essential facilities are K through 12 hospitals, police, city halls, things like that have to survive either man-made or natural disasters. We've got some ADA issues, accessibility issues with this existing facility. Workplace safety, wellness, comfort, all of those things. Those are a lot of shortcomings to kind of overcome as we kind of get our arms around what this building could look like in the future. Next slide, please. Part of our process also included touring some other existing facilities throughout the Wasatch Front. So Bonneville City Hall, South Jordan Public Safety, North Ogden Public Safety, Lehigh Public Safety, and 12 public safety buildings. North Ogden at the time was still under construction, you're probably complete now. I think for us, the most interesting aspect of those, the most educational and informative, are talking to those police chiefs, those city administrators about the lessons learned from having gone through the design and construction process, like asking the question, what would you do differently now in hindsight? So probably the three highest comments, we outgrew it the day we moved in. A year to 15 months of construction, and they're already thinking about, how do we change this space? It costs more than we thought it was going to cost. And then the third one is, there's never enough storage, there's never enough meeting or conference space, and there's not enough sort of flexibility built in for future growth. So that's sort of lessons learned that we and kind of the committee went through the process that we went through in evaluating some of these recently completed facilities. So as a public architecture firm, we often engage some experts in particular fields to assist us to make sure we get it right. We're trying to be super responsible with public dollars. And that means we want to engage the right experts at the right time with the idea that you've got one chance to get this right. You don't want to be the facility that completes it and has some kind of, oops, I wish we would have done something differently. So we've engaged Ross Shepherd Architects. They're an architecture firm out of Denver, and they're widely recognized as a national expert for police planning and design of these facilities. And in addition to that, there's kind of a whole arena full of planning guidelines for police and public safety facilities out there. Ross Shepherd Architects actually helped craft some of the information in this national publication. So they are our partner in this endeavor. Next. I mentioned before about this essential facility, and this is sort of a crude diagram to kind of help illustrate that. With the building code today, there's sort of these 4 classifications of performance levels with regard to what kind of sturdiness you need to create your building around. So there's this operational level. So in the event that there's a natural or man-made disaster, there's 4 different categories. Category A is it remains completely operational. That would be your hospital, your police, city hall facility, your K through 12. So there's very, very little damage. You might see some crack or fall meets the ceiling. You can see a little bit of crack on facade or something like that. But it's essentially safe to occupy and continue running. B is immediate occupancy level. There might be some light sort of cosmetic damage, but you're probably safe to continue. C is life safety level, which basically means it's safe to get people out of the building, but they're probably going to need some substantial structural repair, and it might in fact be beyond repair. And then D is collapse prevention level, and generally you've got 3 to 24 hours to kind of completely evacuate the building before you can expect it to collapse completely. So the next slide, this is categorized as City Hall, police, and the fire station are formally classified as essential facilities. So we have to make sure that in the event of some kind of disaster, that the entire building remains fully operational, which you want for your public, for your community, for your staff, for the investment. Next. So part of our facility analysis also looks at these 5 different categories that today's code dictates. And it's not totally fair to evaluate this building on today's code because it was built several decades ago. But the idea is if you were to try to renovate this building or add on to this building, that effort would trigger a full code compliance effort to meet each item in these 5 categories. So this was just really, again, high level. We didn't like poke around in walls and ceilings or anything like that. But there are a number of areas where the building is non-compliant based on its current use, which translates to more liability that the city is taking on by continuing to operate, at least city hall and community functions out of this building. And lastly, with this slide, this is not an à la carte menu. You have to comply to each and every one of these items. And this is only actually kind of a partial list of all of those requirements. I bring this up because essential facilities, they have a sort of a different, because we need to meet all of these requirements, they have a different price point. Obviously, the construction cost is going to be higher to build this than an apartment or a single family home, or even a commercial house. So next slide. So that said, I don't want to be Debbie Downer on this building. This is still a great asset for the city. It's a hard intersection. I'm not the real estate guy. I'm not the statistician. But we've been working with enough cities to know that there's a lot of value in the existing building for a huge variety of uses that don't fall into the category of essential facility. In addition to that, just the raw land value for retail, restaurant, or residential. There's still a lot of value in the building as is. Next. So with all of this research, kind of talking with other facilities, doing the exploration of what the city believes they needed, we with the committee kind of came up with these 6 guiding principles that we always are referring back to when we're trying to make big picture decisions. So those guiding principles, number 1, designing construction for a 50-year lifespan. That's usually our recommendation to a city, so that they're not spending a lot of dollars 10 years, 2 years, 10 years, 20 years after completion. Number 2, maximize the functional efficiencies. So if it doesn't flow and function efficiently, then we've made a lot of mistakes. Number 3, develop site and buildings as community first amenity. That's something that the committee kind of put on us to say, how many different ways can the community sort of exercise this building? How many different ways can it be used? And extending that out onto the site. So there's a little bit of future planning for what might come down the road to give the city as many options and opportunities and sort of flexibility for campus-wide growth. Number 4, create an appropriate civic building. There's obviously a little bit of subjectivity here, but our thought is we're not trying to create sort of an oversized cozy house. This still needs to convey sort of the stature and stability of Harrisville City to its residents. And then number 5, capitalize, and whenever possible, capitalize on shared multifunctional uses. That's a little bit hard when you've got a police facility, city hall, and sharing the same stairs. We have to have some privacy, some separation between the general public and the police. There are levels of sort of approval at the police level, and in terms of who can go where. And some of that's just relative to kind of making sure evidence is protected and secure and is tracked accordingly. And then number 6, which again kind of goes along with number 1, designing for a 50-year lifespan, incorporate durable, cost-effective, and low-maintenance materials, just to ensure the longevity of lifespan of the building. Next. So in our world, and everybody knows this or thinks about this a little bit differently, there's sort of this 3-legged stool. If you fix 2 of these items, the 3-legged stool is cost, quality, quantity. If you fix 2 of those items, the other one has to give a little bit, right? So if you are dictating a certain quality level and you're dictating a certain size, then your expense has to come up to match that. If you have a fixed budget and you have to have a fixed square footage or a fixed size, then you might have to change your opinion. Well, it might not be the granite Love that guy. He's got it. You might not get the granite countertop, you might have to sell it with mica if your cost and your quantity properly fixed. As architects, we use a variety of tools to kind of help guide information and recommendations that we make to our clients. Obviously, with Laylock Partners, we're been around for 20 years. I've been practicing architecture for about 25 years in this state. So we have our own historical cost data. Again, most of that is based on public sector projects. Ross Shepherd, we're relying on them for some of their historical cost data as well. They're in Denver, which is a little bit more expensive city, but it's still relevant to kind of the police components, just in terms of providing a good benchmark. And then thirdly, locally, we've engaged a cost estimating expert, kind of as a third party, get their eyes on what we're talking about. Construction Control Corporation, they're kind of widely known throughout the Intermountain West for their cost estimating project management experience. And then there's a set of sort of national and regional tools, the AIA, member of the American Institute of Architects, so we have access to their database. We rely on AGC, the Association of General Contractors, which puts together numbers and database. And then E&R, Engineering News Record. I'm going to present some facts and figures from E&R as they go kind of deepest dive details. But it's still pretty easy for a layman like me to kind of understand it. So hopefully I can translate it appropriately. Next slide. There has been a lot of talk about, I think Marcus alluded to it, Jenny mentioned it. Kind of got pretty nuts in middle of 2020. So this is a graph of building construction cost based on the E&R index. And typically what we're seeing is just like inflation. The inflation rate of construction is usually 3 to 5% increase annually, which if you look at that sort of red dash line, represents sort of a consistent flow of inflation year after year. That yellow line is kind of the actual tracking of it. So kind of the gray line before the yellow line goes real steep. That is the middle of 2020, kind of this time 2020. COVID kind of turned things upside down. You can see how steep that yellow line got. So everybody knows, right, that we're much more of a global economy now, local, international. So things that are affecting other parts of the world have some kind of impact on us. And I thought, interestingly enough, I think you kind of circled this little blip on the graph in 08, 09, kind of 2010. When anybody remembers the recession that happened, right? So that is, I think that's a compelling point because the graph got steep, reached its peak, and eventually the graph came back down to hit the normal inflation rate. However, the spike that we saw at 2020 and beyond, we're still kind of experiencing. All of the construction economic forecasters do not believe that we're going to get back to that line. We're not going to see some kind of downturn. At best, it would run horizontal until it met that line again, probably 10 or 12 years. So next slide. So that graph was from 2022. This image, this information on the left side is from July 2024, put out by E&R. And all of this is public information. There's anything proprietary here. You guys can go Google it, find it yourselves. We just try to condense some of this. So with this publication, you can see that we're actually tracking to get back to that regular interest rate or inflation rate, kind of steady horizontal line. And this kind of looks at four different areas of construction. At this point, 3% ready mix concrete. That's that's the increase from June to July. So if that trend follows at 0.3%, we're going to see a 3.5 to 4% inflation rate in that particular market sector this time next year, right? Conversely, the Portland cement is up 1.4% from last month. So that trend continues. And we're going to be up around 15% inflation for that particular product. So why is that important? Portland cement is the key ingredient in concrete. Portland cement is a key ingredient in mortar for masonry. So not only does that number affect concrete, Portland cement, but it affects the brick mason, the CMU mason. So those prices kind of follow that trend. And over on the right-hand side, this is just sort of a summary of kind of this period between March of 2021 and April of 2022. It just identifies this exacerbated inflation rate because of COVID. And so that snapshot of that yellow line trending pretty dramatically is reflected on that steep side of the graph. Maybe it's on the next slide, Jimmy. Yeah, so like I said earlier, if we were to extrapolate that cost forecasting, we kind of know where it landed in 2023, and we think now we've kind of hit that same continuous slope, 3 to 5% inflation year over year. That just has moved up considerably in terms of overall cost. So we're never going to get back to that line. We'll probably kind of create a new line that's going to follow that 3 to 5%. So we use a lot of this historic data to help our clients understand what could happen. When one thing we know for sure is it's going to change. Things are going to be more expensive a year from now, certainly more expensive 3 years from now, 5 years from now. We are in a very weird time. Sometime in the next couple of weeks, there's going to be an announcement about the Olympics. Usually that means the state is going to rally for infrastructure. If we rely on the historic data that's associated with the 2002 Olympics, following that pattern, infrastructure projects are going to come on board, and physical construction projects are going to follow. The other thing in our particular state that was occurring with this 3-year kind of COVID stretch, we had some very, very large projects going on. Prison relocation at the airport, sort of rebuild. That made the rest of us take a double hit because the material costs were already really high, and then labor rates just exploded because of the scale of those two projects required an incredible amount of manufacturers. All right, next. So this is kind of a maybe dumbed down version of the same kind of site plan. In the pink, we kind of talked about Public Works Phase 2. To the left of that is Public Works Phase 1 that's under construction right now. In the light blue, kind of identified as police, city hall, campus with the associated parking. So there'd be some private secured parking for staff, and then open parking for the public on the other side of the facility. And in Northview Fire, working with them to design their facility as part of this campus and kind of make it all integrated as well. Marcus and I think Jenny also mentioned this continuation of 1700 North, connecting it to Highway 89 as I think a separate funding vehicle. So that's a separate city project. Next. So getting down to dollars, just, for Public Works Phase 2, we estimate that at, 1.35 million. Again, some of that is dependent on the timing. So that's about a 6,000 square foot vehicle storage building, and fuel island, as well as some perimeter secure fencing, depending on what happens with the city hall, police city hall facility, and possibly the addition of some automatic vehicle gates as well. Police and the city hall project, and we've been working on this since November. And so I think this was our third iteration to try to bring some costs down. At this particular meeting, we were at 16.6 million. And the committee said, that's not going to work. We need to figure out ways to bring down the cost, without sacrificing, quality and quantity. So that rabbit is still being pulled out of the hat. I think the next slide, I think our meeting for the first part of June, working through some opportunities with both the police and the city administration. We come up with some construction strategies and reduce some square footage, still providing all of the function that the city needs, including the potential for some future growth, to get that construction cost down to 12.8 million, without any substantial sort of compromise to function. So that's kind of our current cost estimate summary for construction of the police city hall facility. Next slide. Just quickly, just wanted to share a little bit more information about our process. We're always trying to put options in front of the committee and help them understand, kind of evaluate objectively the pros and cons. So we gave them a series of studies for this replacement of this room, the council chambers, and community multi-purpose space. Kind of showed them three different layouts. This one was 3,600 square feet. Next slide. Actually looked at trimming some square footage off a little bit, reduced that down to 3,400 square feet. Kind of showing the same kind of layout so they can understand how many people it can hold, various sort of settings or functions. Next slide. And then the third option was kind of taking that same space, cutting off a little bit more square footage, just sort of going through the questions. Does it still work? Does it still work long term for the city, for the community, with kind of the growth rate? And how does this compare to what you have now, what you're envisioning for the future? So just quickly, next slide. We did that for the multi-purpose center. We did that for a number of police components, kind of asking chief, are you okay, like sacrificing this, losing this, reducing square footage? This is where we did kind of get to an a la carte menu. Would you rather have the sally port? Would you rather have a patrol conference room? Would you rather have showers and changing rooms? Keep going, Jennie, please. So we went through a number of iterations, trying to eke out square footage without really compromising functionality. And certainly we don't want to handcuff anybody for future growth that we know is going to be sort of inevitable. So this is some more of the kind of police facility studies, just looking at trimming some square footage. Next slide. And then we did the same exercise with the administrative portion, which is up on the second floor. Just kind of strategizing, reduce some square footage, think about future build outs. We could go away from some hardwall construction, kind of get furniture solutions. All of that is in an effort to right size the facility for what you guys need today and what you're confident that you will need in the future. But trying to get it back to a more manageable construction cost estimate. So with that, our current cost study, the actual physical building, we're estimating about 12.4 million. Recommending that the city carry at least $435,000 for construction contingency, making that total 12.8 million, 12.85 of the construction costs. Again, this is just for the city hall and the associated site. There's a handful of additional categories: construction fees, soft costs, so forth. There's some contingency with that. So that brings a total of 1.8 million for that category, or accumulation of those categories, making a total project cost of 14.675 million. That's construction plus furniture, all those other stuff. That's our most educated guess at a project that would be anticipate be bidding summer of 2025. So that's the other thing we're trying. We're not saying these are today's dollars. We're saying those are dollars that will start hitting middle of next year. Next slide. I mentioned the public works phase 2 is about 6,000 square feet, maybe 5,600 or something, adjusted in vehicle storage. Police City Hall, 25,800 square feet. Northview Fire, just for your information, is about 14,000 square feet. Three out bays, 8, 9. Next. Hopefully that can shed a little bit more light on where some of the dollars are coming from that we're kind of talking about hypothetically. Any questions that I can answer for anybody?
Thank you, Kevin.
You bet.
Yeah, and maybe direct it to Wilson. We're trying to get that accredited with our current facilities that, strengths at all.
As far as just accreditation, no. The accreditation is done on policy alone. So procedures and policies is what the accreditation is.
In the scaled down version, do we have enough space for this incident command center in case of a major emergency based on the scaled down version?
Yes, that would. Incident command would be in, be put into the police training room. So that's where that's like the little conference room we have downstairs would be just more or less moved to that training. Is that what you're asking? Yeah.
So from what I understand, you might. You guys need to make a decision. You go back now to Marcus, and he has 3 options, correct?
Well,
Is
just
that what we need to do?
3 examples of options. I think it is worth bringing up. One of the questions that was brought up was the lease revenue bonds have been put under referendum. So that means if the city did want to move forward with lease revenue bonds, it would require the vote of the people as part of an election. We do have Brandon here. There are questions on referendum and what all that entails. One scenario that wasn't included there is if the city council did want to move forward, so keep the 9 million in place. Obviously, we saw the numbers, so it's going to be approximately 6 million that we would need. I would actually suggest letting the lease revenue bonds die and going to the public. If you did want to do that this year for the 6 million, you may as well go as a GO bond to the public if it's going to require the vote, because you would get a better interest rate. And it's going to be paid from the same sources of property tax, regardless if it's a GO bond or a lease revenue bond. So that could be one option there, but Typically, when something does go into a referendum process, I would say more than likely that typically means that it's a dead deal, if that makes sense, that the public have said we're not supporting this, or there was not enough information, and we do not want the city council to move forward with this. So we're going to vote on it, and most likely it will not pass in the election process. That may be the same case for the GO bonds as well. If they go to the ballot, maybe at that point, the city would have a better understanding if they wanted to pay back or send back the 9 million, if they did that approach. We do have some deadlines, like I did mention before, we do have some restrictions on that 9 million in cash. You know, eventually we will have to decide what we're gonna do with it, and that would probably be about this time next year. You would need to start allocating that, spending it, earmarking it, or we need to send it back. So that's probably, you know, whatever you're feeling, let me know, and we can kind of walk you through what may be the best avenues there. And, you know, but I think it's just really what mayor, city council, staff, what you kind of feel at this point is what you're comfortable with and what you want to do to proceed, to move forward, whether it's with this project, a portion of this project, or some combination in between.
The staff have a recommendation.
I would agree with Marcus on the referendum. I don't believe that we can set the record straight based on the misinformation that we were continuing to build a recreation center with this. I think it's a good opportunity to kind of reset and continue through the architectural process of the design. As was shown on the previous slide, the soft costs, these are the costs that we were rolling into paying with the bond money to protect the city from having to come up with that revenue outside of the regular revenue sources for the city. So that would need to be covered in the continuation of the design on the city hall police department. But we are definitely looking for your direction. We've been trying to keep you apprised of what's going on through our processes. We know that it felt rushed because of the deadlines to meet. We did, as staff, have to determine the truth and taxation rate on our own because we didn't feel comfortable based on the input that we received in June to do anything beyond what we've suggested. You can always bring that rate down. We can just not increase it from what we've advertised. So I would recommend, if the council wants to move forward this year, that we would move forward with a GO bond and anticipate that there might not be positive election results at either side for this year.
Your deadline for that, I believe, was August 22nd. August 22nd is the last date that you would have to basically do the, I believe, a resolution notifying or giving intent to move forward with a GO bond and give notice to the county that that's what you're planning to do as part of an election.
So really, it has to be delivered to the lieutenant governor's office on the 22nd.
21st.
So what that looks like for us is it would have to be determined at our office meeting, which is next month. We'll hold our truth and taxation public hearing on August 6th at 7 p.m. And then our regular council meeting will be the following Tuesday at 7 p.m. where you'll vote on the final budget. And this resolution, if I understand correctly, would have to be adopted at that time to do the GO bond for continuing on the route going, but we can also pause election part of it and continue down the architectural process of design, have it fully designed and come back after that point. And the public will know exactly what we're asking to build. We will have a little bit of uncertainty with the dollar amounts because of the inflation rates. We don't control that, but that's certainly an option for the council. We just need your direction so that we're not continuing down a path that you don't want us to go.
I kind of, if I feel that the petition was based on a lot of infactual things, But I believe the people have spoken. And I think that it needs to go referendum. My personal.
Well, just to clarify on that, so it is in referendum now, so if you decided you wanted to do the lease revenue bonds, our suggestion would just be, you may as well get a lower interest rate bond and have them vote on the same thing regardless. So this wouldn't be bypassing any voting procedures or anything, nobody would be suggesting that, but it would just be, well, if we're gonna vote on it, we may as well ask them to vote on a GO bond versus a lease revenue bond for the lower interest rate.
Sorry, and also the fact that we would have to go through truth and taxation every year. If it's a geo bond, it goes through its own system of identifying what that taxing bracket would be, and then it doesn't put us in the position with the lease revenue that we might have to go through truth and taxation again. So that's another reason why I would be recommending going to the geo bond if you'd like to move forward with the election.
But it doesn't have to be determined tonight. It can be, but it doesn't have to be,
That's all I
can input.
And that may be something, you know, no one wants to waste, obviously, city council's time, we don't want to waste staff's time, so as you're talking to your neighbors and constituents and everything else, it may just be worth saying, well, hey, if we brought this back and asked the public to vote for $6 million to help us finish the city hall and the police station, you know, and obviously there would be no language pertaining to rec, you know, we make sure all that is, you know, all that misinformation's been cleaned up, then would that be something you would support? And if everyone's still no, then, I mean, we can save you some time and money by not having to go through the election process this year and kind of figure out what we want to do from that point.
So for clarification for me, when I go home and talk to my wife, who's a mathematician, she's gonna say, okay, we're looking at $6 million. All right, how do I figure out? Because we now have a tax assessed at what? At 1 or 5.15.
Our current certified tax rate is 0.001500. It was going to drop a little bit, and we proposed maintaining the rate in our revenue, but we also added a small amount to cover the cost of public relations. Also, we have a code enforcement need, and so we needed some revenue to cover those costs. So the proposed tax increase for this year is 5.25, which amounts to approximately $50,000 in additional revenue for the city. That advertisement will go out shortly. It'll be on the public notice website, and also in our August newsletter. But mind you, that's not taking any account any of the bond.
Well, one thing you may want to do is on that slide I had that showed the $13 million scenario, roughly divide all those numbers in half, and that's going to be the impact to that. So we'll send it Jennie updated numbers tomorrow that shows $6 million and what to anticipate, but that $13 million scenario, I mean, approximately half of whatever those impacts were is what you would anticipate on top of your regular tax bill from the city.
See on that, you did an approximation of what size of house?
$320,000.
See, ours are around 700,000, so I'm trying to figure out how to make those.
Well, that was the number we had to use based on. Yeah. And so maybe what I can send to Jennie is we can run that $6 million using $100,000 valuation. So if yours is 700,000, you can multiply it by 7. I mean, we're happy to do whatever makes it clear and beneficial for the public.
That's where I'm going from.
Gotcha.
Is when I'm talking to somebody out here in public, they're gonna say, okay, what's my taxes gonna go on?
Yeah.
And if they have that information, just, you know, I'm trying to be simple about it. I know how to count to 4, and that's what my music degree tells me. So keep it simple.
And I'm happy to share an Excel sheet with Jennie too, if that makes it easier. So if she wants to distribute that, so you can just say, okay, this 700,000, okay, this is what it would look like. We want it to be simple. We don't want it to be a painstaking effort for anybody. But again, that 320,000 number, we just use that number because when we go to the county, we ask them for the average value home, and that was the number they gave us on the last GO bond. So I just wanted to be a little consistent.
Yeah, I just want to say, I think people I've talked to, they recognize the concern with the city needing to grow. That's not the issue. The issue is bottom line, how much it's gonna cost us and can I afford to do that? And I think once that is brought out, then an intelligent decision can be made, just and it's being held in the dark because they don't know how to figure it out.
So there's two options we have for the public to help them understand that. Our truth and tax mitigation notice is based on the average median home in Harrisville, which is $416,000. So that's where we get our valuation from the county. The 5.25% proposed increase for this year will impact approximately $17, a little change per household per year for that 5.25%. We've also had a staff member, our treasurer, put together a property tax calculator. So any of our residents can come into the city of Bolton and tell us their parcel number. We can calculate out what the property tax increase would be to them personally based on their home occupation. We have that available. I wanted to incorporate that tonight with you. Time for that, but it's available and she's available and our staff will make sure all of our staff members have that information to be able to help people understand what that.
Thank you.
So any other questions for me? All right.
You know, there's a lot to think about. Anything else? Want to, what do you want to do here? Like 2 minutes time, you want to table this decision? Talk to your constituents. Okay. Yeah, just to talk to the public. Okay. Could I get a motion to that? That's if you're ready. It is just a discussion, but Brody always wants me to.
No, you don't need to do a motion. I think the caveat that we need to be crystal clear in is if you're going forward with any kind of, referendum's gonna go one way or another if you don't do anything. But if you want to go to geo one, that has to be done at the meeting in August. So you don't have a meeting to talk about it and then another meeting to do it. So just with that understanding that I don't know how we as staff prepare that unless we have some direction. And I don't mean to be blunt, but.
And the geo bond is what we're talking about going on the ballot.
Yes, the geo bond goes to the ballot and really Marcus articulated that. It's basically, if you're gonna vote, we should vote for the cheaper product.
Right, that's the old geo part.
Exactly.
Okay, so what we're looking at is 6 million, the geo bond.
Well,
It depends on what you all want to do. That would be a suggestion. If you feel like that's an adequate thing. Sorry, Mayor,
no,
please.
that's okay. I'm just thinking that with what you've explained, the better product would be the 15 million geobot to turn back the night.
No, actually, let's make this clear so that people go to the constituents on the same page. My suggestion today is since the 6 million lease revenue bond is in referendum, my suggestion would be for the city council to not move forward with that because that's most likely going to fail. And it's going to require a vote of the people regardless. And I know there's a lot of concern because people do not like the leasing mechanism. There was some confusion, completely understand that. So if we want to move forward with the $6 million option, including the 9 million that we currently have from the sales and franchise tax bonds to do the project as presented based off these new numbers, it would be to move away from the lease revenue bond. Public does not want that. To move forward with a geo bond of 6 million and to have that on the ballot for this year. Now, if we go into next year, which means that we're going to run into some issues and that we wouldn't have a geo bond until the end of 2025, then that's when I would probably say, let's probably figure out what we're going to do with that 9 million, most likely send the bulk of it back, to downsize that bond, and then do a 15 million election for the total of the project. But if they did want to move forward this year to avoid some of the construction inflation, and if you did get positive feedback from your constituents, the $6 million geo bond voted option would be the best strategy to move forward with for this year. So, Brody, okay. So,
Marcus, can I
please.
just Brandon Johnson, serving as bond counsel, just with respect to if you do decide to move forward with the general obligation bond, at your next meeting in August, in that meeting itself, you can have a discussion about the amount of that. So maybe it's 6 million, maybe it's 5.5, maybe it's 6.2. that decision can be made in the meeting itself, and then as part of the motion to adopt the election resolution, it would include the amount. And so you do, and we're even happy to prepare that bond election resolution. And if you decide, we don't want to move forward, then, it's okay. But you can also, I guess, don't feel like you have to beforehand make that ultimate decision. You can come here, talk about it amongst yourselves in the meeting, and then decide even that night what the amount will be. And then we can fill it in the election resolution.
Okay, so in other words, we can come prepared and still vote on it.
Exactly, yeah. And yeah, so obviously, and you can have discussions amongst yourselves beforehand, but yeah, don't feel like you have to come to the meeting already knowing, okay, it's gotta be 6 million or it's gotta be 6.1 million. You can come and have that discussion and ultimately you decide that night, let's say it's 5.9 million. That would be part of the motion, and then we put that actually into the election resolution. So yeah, I guess just you don't have to know the exact amount. And we already know what the project will be, so we'll include that. We would include that in the language. And really it would just be a blank for the actual amount of the bond that could be decided that night.
Okay, the other side of the coin then is, okay, GO bond doesn't pass. We still have 9 million. And we decide, or it all goes away, and we stay the way we are.
Now we have to decide what to do with the 9 million.
Well, I know
It
that.
doesn't have to be at that meeting, but later in that year, just going into, I would just say you need to start figuring out that 9 million by about April, May of next year needs to kind of be your deadline. Okay, we're going to spend some, let's go ahead and appropriate it. Anything that we're not going to spend, let's pay off these bonds and look at that scenario. So that would be my suggestion to you, just so you don't get in a little bit of trouble with potentially arbitrage rebate requirements.
No, that's fine, I understand that. But if that satisfies with what's going on, we don't move ahead with any type of construction. That's right. And that's what I'm saying.
But do you want to move forward with the architectural things, so that when we do have money next year, 2 years, 5 years, we can be ready for that?
I think we should. And so, I
Yes.
mean, that's one of the things that I've heard. I want to see a pair of plans, I want to see what it's going to cost. You give us a lot of that tonight. I appreciate that.
And staff needs directions. So staff does need directions here, to go forward. So okay, we okay with that? You understand?
So we'll just wait to hear back from Jennie on how the perceived city council wants to move forward for that meeting. If they say, hey, we do want to have GO language, we want to discuss it in August, then we'll work with Brandon and give you the opportunity to discuss it, talk about it. And even at that point, you could say, well, we don't want to do this. That's fine. That's, it's a voted thing. So it's definitely up to your discretion. So.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Everybody, that's a lot. Moving on to.
So I just wanted to clarify if that's okay. Are we going to come prepared to vote in August then on the GO voting? So.
Are we ready to go on then?
Yeah, I just think that we need to be pretty diligent in getting information out, and I don't know, more on the website, whatever the case is, but really we need to have some kind of campaign to get education out and help people understand what it is that we're trying to do. And
so just to follow up, we didn't mention this. So if you decide to move forward with the GO bond, that means you still have to do the same steps of any GO bond. So there would still be a voter information pamphlet. You could hold public hearings. You could, reach out to people. We would actually encourage, and that's one reason, GO bonds require a lot of work also from city council too, because you guys are the ones really selling it to your constituents on why do we need this $6 million. And so, I would probably say we would probably hold, you don't have to per law, but you would probably hold a few open houses just to say, hey, please ask us questions. Why do we need the 6? Where's the 9? We already got the 9. Like, help them understand why this makes sense and why you're supporting this election to move forward. And that again, it's very much effort. So I would say if you do not feel like you're gonna get the support you need this year, again, it's a lot of effort to go through this process, then my recommendation, me and Jane talked about this, then don't be afraid to say, we just know this isn't the year. Let's look at it in 2025. We'll figure out what to do with the 9 million of sales tax if we need to send it back or whatever it is. And so that may increase the GO amount for that election because you sent back the 9 million. But again, just whatever your residents and constituents say, listen to them, build them out, and we're happy to help through whatever process you choose. Sorry, I didn't mean to come back.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you. Moving on to item I, which is a discussion, possible actions to authorize the purchase of Western Irrigation Water Shares. Jennie.
Thank you, Mayor. So there's a little background behind this item. This, as you are all aware, we incorporated the 4 Mile Special Service District a number of years ago to provide secondary water service in areas of the city where Pineview is not servicing. As part of that requirement, developers are required to submit water shares for those subdivisions, sufficient water shares to cover the second pressurized secondary water system. In one of our subdivisions, incorrect amount was submitted to the city, and we received a certificate for an irrigation company that's not within our boundaries. So the staff has contacted that irrigation company outside of our boundaries, and we have entered an agreement with a water shareholder who has Western Irrigation Shares, who is interested in trading the city for the Warren Irrigation Shares certificate that we already have. So there is no cost associated with this transaction. In fact, the Warren Irrigation Shares actually have a value attached to them. We've struggled to get a value attached to the Western Irrigation Shares number, but we do have one for Warren. And the buyer is compensating the city with cash funds to make up that difference. There's also a proposed approved subdivision that will be using Lynn Irrigation Water Shares, and the same buyer has a few Lynn Irrigation Shares they were willing to put into this transaction because they don't have property within that. So this is more of a trade transaction than a purchase, but because that was an asset of the city, we are asking for city council's permission before we complete that transaction. The contract was in your packet and it's been signed by the purchaser.
Any questions, council?
So what do you need from us?
You just need a motion to accept.
I will make the motion that we accept the action to authorize the purchase of the Western Irrigation Water Shares.
I'll second. Yeah, motion and a second. This is roll call. Councilmember Fawcett? Yes. Councilmember Christensen?
Yes.
Councilmember Jackson?
Yes.
Councilmember Williamson?
Yes.
Thank you.
Sure.
They were probably your power. Yeah. All right, moving on to item number 6. This is public comment. This is when those in the audience that have anything to say about anything of your concern can come up to the podium, state your name, and limit your comments to 3 minutes. It's not an interchange, it will just be a limit.
Good evening, Martin Farrell. I reside here in Harrisville. With a little bit of the concern of water shares, if I may, I'd like to present some information to the council. It's from Western Irrigation and then an email as well. Do I have permission to approach the council?
So what, I'm not sure what the information.
I can show you.
So you're just presenting this?
I'm presenting this as information, so that the council has information to the water shares. It's the amount of water shares that are required per acreage of property as it's being developed. this has to, where you created the 4-mile water district, and you're requiring water shares. This is just information from Western Irrigation Company. And then also what I have here is the email that was sent out from Western Irrigation about no more stormwater being put into Western Irrigation Canal.
All right, why don't you leave those to the city reporter and get this through? Thank you.
Thank you. I would just like to make sure that you have that information as far as irrigation goes. I would like to make a comment on, I believe it was Mr. Harris that gave the presentation with the housing. And most of you know here that I am going to say this again in this meeting, but I value the property, I value land, I respect the land. We're not making any more land. And I've said this before, but we need to be smart about how we manage the land that we do have. And I've said, take your homes, let's stack them as high as we can, because we're not making any more land. And I'd like to have that acreage, I'd like to have that ground. But the presentation tonight, I think I'm just going to say, I think that we all need to think about it and how to manage it and those lands, and maybe have smaller lots, but do it right, do it correctly. You know, with a good environment around us so that we can still try to keep Harrisville. Thank you.
Barely made it.
Oh.
Jason Hadley, just a couple of questions. I thought there was a lot of good information that was presented in the meeting tonight. So we heard a lot about the money that was going to be for City Hall and the Public Works, but there's one other building that's also sitting on that property. And it'd be really nice to know, well, what is that going to impact us as well? Because that's going to be part of the plan. I really wish that with that whole presentation, that $15 million leaves out the entire fire building. And we don't have yet a price tag what that would be. And I understand that actually hasn't passed. And so it's important that we're being honest with the public that that whole facility, it's only 2 out of 3 buildings. The other thing that I think is really important is we have a resource that sounds like people can find out what is it going to affect their property tax, but it requires them to get out of their house, drive down to here, make an appointment during business hours to find out, why can't we make that available online? That'd be such a convenient tool to be added online that people could just look up tax rates. Because all it is looking at a table, correct? So why don't we publish that information and make it available? And the last comment that I have is that it was talked about going forward with the architectural designs. That might be a good thing, but I'd hope, again, you would use judgment in making sure you're not putting the cart before the horse. If we know what the total cost is going to be, that makes a whole lot of sense. But if we're really not sure that things are going to change going forward with architectural designs that may not fit what we needed to fit when we're actually ready to move, it is going to be a harder thing. So those are just my comments. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Aaron Field. I live here in Harrisville. Just a concern about the Oak Hollow subdivision that was just approved. And I guess just going forward with my thoughts, I guess. There's lots of memes that go around the internet that say, explain this to me like I'm a 3rd grader, right? And that's how my brain works, like a 3rd grader brain.
I admit that, I'm not, the lawyer talk is way above my head, and if I want to understand something, it's got to be explained to me simply. So basically, if I understand what just happened tonight, we just approved a master development agreement. What is a master development agreement? From the words Barringfield, somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. A master development agreement says, okay, we have code that has been approved by city council and by planning commissions for maybe 50 years ago, 60 years ago. That code has been approved, and that code makes it easy for everyone to protect everything. The existing homeowners are protected by the code. The developer comes in with the understanding, here's Harrisville's code, here's what I've got to do to please Harrisville. So master development agreement, what is that? You take that code book and you throw it in the garbage and you say, we're gonna let the developer decide how he wants to proceed. And then everyone on the planning commission and everyone on the city council, in order to do an informed vote, has to look through this 400-page, I don't know how big the plans are, book with a ruler and walk out to the field and lay a tape measure across things and say, oh yeah, this makes sense, or no, man, he's trying to put this house 3 feet away from a property line or whatever. So I don't know, I might be oversimplifying it, somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me the code is there to protect everybody. It's been said that the Oak Hollow subdivision meets the code. I think that's up for debate, but why do we got to enter into a development agreement if it already meets the code? I don't understand why we're entering into a development agreement that puts the code book in the garbage if it already meets the code. I guess I don't know, somebody could explain that to me, I guess. And then I guess my only other thing is, we're talking about affordable housing. How do we make affordable housing? And I would like to just, I guess, ask the question, if this is affordable housing, what is a house gonna cost in Oak Hollow subdivision? My guess is we don't hear an answer to that question because it's probably still not affordable. And so we're affecting neighboring properties. I don't know, the other question, maybe a rhetorical question, how close is this house gonna be to my backyard? So, I don't know that anybody knows that, and we've approved this master development agreement. How close is this gonna be to my house? So far I haven't heard an answer to that, but, okay, thanks.
Hi, Kevin Karras. Just to clarify, at least on my part, there's no confusion about the recreation bond. And my message that I have had, is I've talked to people about the $10 million bond that was put out as public information, not $6 million. In fact, that becomes part of the confusion. You published that $10 million lease revenue bond, and now you're talking about $6 million. How do you expect people not to be confused? You're saying after the fact, that's not what we meant. What you meant was what you published, 10 million. You may have had a working discussion, which I listened to a number of times. 6 million got presented, 7 million, but it all came down to how much was property taxes gonna go up. That seemed to be the limiting thing. What I never heard was the council say, we need to put a limit on how much we're gonna spend on the public works. What was implied when you did the sales tax one was $15 million. That's what it said, $15 million. Try and explain how inflation or COVID or whatever else you want to wave your arms at created that difference. That's a big difference that you're talking about. $6 million you cannot account for. It seems to be that the architect wasn't told we've got $15 million. What I heard in the working meeting was that each one of the organizations was asked, what do you need? Great. Kevin, what do you need? I need a new truck. My wife would say I need a new house. I need a bigger house. But what can you afford? And I hear messages about this has been taught, but all the information here seemed to be rather new to me, unless the amount of information that was presented suggests that this was the first time you heard a lot of this, quite honestly. That you've not, as a council, said this is the dollar amount, and they're asking for direction, then this is what needs to happen. So my expectation would be with the public, whatever way you go, is the message I would present is $15 million was what was promised to do this complex. I think you're barking up the wrong tree when you talk about the fire station too. That adds confusion, because now it implies, oh, somehow we're tied in with the fire station. That's part of the cost. If you're gonna go clarify things, get the fire station out of there. You can say they may purchase it, but that becomes a whole nother thing for us as citizens to go track down why we need another fire station. When I can look at a lot of cities that are a lot larger and only have 2 fire stations. Thank you.
Curtis, my name's Curtis Christensen. I do appreciate the information that's been given out today. There's been a lot of different information passed around by the city, by others. So yes, a lot of information is out there, and some of it's true, some of it's not true. Some of it's initiated by the cities, some initiated by other people. So there is a lot of confusion, maybe a little bit of lack of trust. And so I encourage you to try to build that trust back. One question I did have tonight is when we was listening to the architect and how they looked at his buildings, we kind of went back from requirements that had to be there versus guidelines that they wanted. I'm curious where those requirements are, what statute or code has been adopted by a government agency, and where that is, or if there is. If there isn't one, then it's a lot of guidelines that maybe they're good to follow, but maybe we don't need to follow them. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm gonna let you know, I do appreciate all the information you gave us tonight and on everything, so I was taking notes. The cluster subdivision, first I listened to the gentleman on Fieldstone Homes and wanting smaller lots. I know there are cities that do have smaller lots and they function quite well. My concern is what is our lot size now? I did sit on the planning commission once upon a time, and I know you have to go through and change ordinances in order to get to that. So why can't you make some kind of code or covenant change if he wants to go in and buy 3 acres and say, okay, we're gonna give you this right here. Why do we need to change everything as long as he follows the roads? I don't know if you guys have heard of the book, Dr. Lesser Magistrate. You guys are the bosses in this town. We represented you, we elected you to represent us. And that doesn't mean by having some developer come in and strong arm you and say, we want this, we want you to change your guidelines to meet us. You guys need to stand firm on what the guidelines are that we, the people of Harrisville, want. We enjoy our city here for a reason. So why can't you go do some cluster subdivision like what I just saw just got passed? Just say, okay, if you want this, this is what we're gonna give you. You buy 5 for it, or you go someplace else. We don't need here. And affordable, 573,000, that's affordable. I'm sorry, my daughter right now is struggling with a house that much. The other thing is they're talking about inflation rates. Now, I know when my daughter went to build her home, the contractor said, I can build it for this much. And although it took 6 months and prices went up, her price of her house did not go up. Why is it that if we're bidding out saying this is gonna cost us this much, but in 5 years, oh, we might have to add more onto it because now inflation has gone up and so we're gonna charge you more. When you bid out a price, that's the price you stick by, irregardless of whether prices go up or not. So I have an issue with it. I believe that's. So again, I do want to appreciate you guys, sharing the information that you did with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Michelle Singleton. Lots of information tonight, so appreciate the clarification. My statement also, making it specific for the people that are listening at home or read it at a later time. But on the clarification of the bonds, there's frustration. There was an election that took place, they voted no bond, but yet a bond took place. They don't understand, and that helped me to understand tonight, that there are some bonds that have to be voted on and some that are not. But they don't hear about the ones that they don't have to vote on. So it gives the impression that they're sneaking things through the back door. So my comment tonight, there was a bond, and it wasn't, I have no confusion over it was for recreation buildings. They think it has to do with the complex. They voted no, but yet other bonds came through. So there's some miscommunication and people don't understand. I would love to have more information so that people can understand. City council meetings, I know there's been some frustration. I've talked to some of you and you feel like then they should be here at these meetings if they want to have words, if they want to be said. But there are many people that are tonight that are volunteering their time at youth activities. We personally have to be at other cities, at other city council meetings for our businesses, so we can't be here every time. But many of us really are reading the notes, really are listening to the minutes, but there's not a place for a recourse to come back and talk with you about it. Town hall meetings would be so helpful, and it's better communication. The newsletter comes out often, the information that things have already taken place by the time the newsletter gets to us, or things change by the time it's written and we get to read it. And so many of them do not get the newsletter because they pay their bill online. The city website is a little bit challenging to navigate. So those are just things. People really do want to be supportive of you. I do, but the information is not happening and people are misunderstanding. What they're seeing is the restraints this lady just referred to and where they have to live. And historically, through eons of time, the governing bodies sometimes live and work in situations that are much more elevated than what the citizens are required to live in, because of their assets. And they don't understand why we have to have limited assets, but the governing body does not. They just raise the taxes, and that's what they have to pay, which limits their circumstances even further. I'm not saying that that's true to life. I'm sharing with you what people have shared with me. They need to understand what is a need, what is a want, what is more convenient. Our city has chosen to have a police force, other cities have not. That is why they can choose to have buildings, new buildings. We have to help them to understand our choices. Thank you.
Roger Schumann. I need to get my address. Thanks for the information for tonight. I'm still a bit confused with the project costs. I have to say, I watched as we went in and we showed a cost of $16 million for the police and the city hall. Then it reduced down to 12, so I got her to 12, and then there was a $1.3 million expense for phase 2. I'm not sure where the 1.3 million went into that number and how we came to the final conclusion of 14,675. And I'm assuming that that doesn't include the $6 million you're spending on phase 1. So that was still a little confusing to me. The other concern that I have, and it's been going on for multiple years, but we brought up something about code enforcement, enforced code. City ordinances, codes, all those things kind of go hand in hand. And many years I spent in the planning commission, I worked on many ordinances and there was all issues with city residents, and I currently have a resident that lives next to me that if you follow the city ordinances, it doesn't apply to the animals he has on the property. The 50 loads of dirt he hauled into the property, the diesel mechanic shop he's running out of his residential home. The semis are still parked out on 750 West. So I believe we're on year 3 of that. So anyway, thanks for what you do.
Seeing no one else, I'm going to close public comments. Move on to Mayor Nancy Baldwin. I'm going to go third staff first, please. Chief Wilson, would you like to go first?
Well, last week we had our two detectives get sworn in.
Sir, would you put your mic on?
He's calling me short. So our two detectives got sworn in with the Marshals VFAS team, which is the Violent Fugitive Apprehension Strike Team. What they do is all agencies around the state volunteer their officers to go work on this team, and they work on high profile ones, sex offenders, just the violent ones. So not only is it a good thing for the community to get these people out of the community, the resources that come with that our detective had access to being on that team is crucial. So they will start doing that within the next month. They'll be going out and participating on that team. Mr. Silverwood, that you guys met last month,
Yes.
is slated to be done with his FTO and be out on the road by September 2nd. And you guys have been stopping at some lemonade stands and spending some time with kids, and it's been kind of fun. We got a few pictures, there was some on the Facebook page, so that's all I have this month.
Thank you. Dr. Schnitzel.
As we're all very aware of the summer months comes the Utah state flag of 40 barrels on the road. Progress is coming along Highway 89 with two separate projects. One is the sewer line tie into the Ben Lomond development. The other is the resurfacing project that is being done by Utah. They're kind of hand in hand. We're still trying to get through the sewer line by the end of July. The resurfacing will you'll see mill down and overlay start to take place around the 1st of August through about the 15th to 20th of August with new blacktop and new striping down 89. Right now, currently, we are dealing with a lot of new development, a lot of infrastructure going in, not just on Ben Lomond development, but many other developments, Ashland Cove, which is right across the highway. We finally see homes going up there. A new Dixon Creek development that is out on Washington Boulevard and ties into 1300. There is the Oak Hollow off Larsen Lane that's still continuing to move forward, and hopefully have a solution to a pressurized irrigation system in the next few weeks. There is the city complex at the public works site that is very fast moving forward. Hopefully their completion date by January 1, 2025. And we'll be excited to have that be able to better service the residents. It's probably a little early, but in the next few months, we will start gearing up for our favorite snowplow season, getting our trucks and plows and everything ready for, as we know, sometime in October, maybe our first storm. It sounds like a long way away, but it's actually coming on. So,
Could you give us an update on Millennium?
Oh, yes, also, Millennium Park is under construction for new restrooms, new playground equipment, new sprinkler system. After more lighting around the track, they will, that will probably hopefully be done by, again, early this winter. And be able to move forward and have our Millennium Park back to fully operational, fully functional.
Tell us who's paying for that and why.
That is the developer of the Ben Lomond Golf Course. As part of the MBA, is that they have some infrastructure and amenities back and update the existing restrooms that were there. Needed some updating and they felt like it was better solution to demolish those and rebuild brand new. So same with the playground equipment and all those amenities that will be all brand new. With a walking bridge over from the park over to the new developments, that's all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Director Files.
So just quickly on the pocket park, if you've driven by, the grass is trying really hard, the weeds are doing great. It is growing. We have really strict instructions on what we're supposed to do as far as watering, when we can fertilize, when we're supposed to mow. Just following the guidelines from the people that put that in. So just so you know, we are watching it. We're over there today weeding some fence lines and trimming the trees, but it is growing. The moving the park was very successful. Last time we polled about 150 people, staff counted until we got to about 150. That's comparable to Pleasant View, who is, I would say, considerably larger than us. So whether or not they're the same people or not, I don't know, but it was fun. Yard games and popcorn. The YCC was there handing out popcorn and interacting with people. Our next one is this Friday. So if you have a chance, come out and support us. It will be hot. And say again, Chicken is the movie. And just a thought would be maybe on these movie nights, I was thinking maybe we could leave the splash pad open a little bit longer until the movie starts. Just a thought, unless I'm told no, that's what we'll do.
You need to have that. I think that's a great idea.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Administrator Knight.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to bring to the council's attention the loss of a business owner in Harrisville. It's brought to our attention that the vice president of HHI was unfortunately in the accident the weekend. So we express our condolences to his family for that accident. And just a point of information from staff, as department heads were meeting every other week to identify capital facilities issues in the city and come up with a capital facilities plan for you to adopt, and so we can allocate appropriate funds moving forward for the city so that we don't find ourselves in similar circumstances in the future.
Thank you. All right, Council Matt, do you have anything?
No.
Record.
We had a great senior citizens luncheon. We had the YCC come over and run it, and they had a delightful time and got a chance to know a lot of senior citizens. It was a great experience. So, and then met with them and they proposed a list and things that they have done. It's quite lengthy. It's a full sheet. The activities they plan to do in 2024 and 25 and all those things. And one of the big things that they did say is that city councils. So that's cool. I think that will be good.
Thank you. I just had a couple of things. When you said that we had proposed and raised for the code enforcement, did we do anything about a city planner? You talked about before.
So that's the third arm that we needed for that. We did put a little more money into our contracting planning services for this next year, and we have contract planner.
Okay.
But Yes, the $50,000, they probably will pay for all three of those.
So, yeah, okay, because I think that's super important. I mean, couple other things, I just, couple clarifications I felt like we needed to do was the affordable housing piece that, the state's legislated that we have some affordable housing, and like the presenter was saying, you know, a lot of people are saying not in my city. Well, whose city then? Where are they supposed to go? And he wasn't saying that the 500,000 was an affordable house. It was just using that as an example of how much you can cut costs by increasing some of that density. And so I would just like to clarify that we are trying to meet the mandates that we have, but also make things affordable for those. And yes, I live on 2550. I didn't want a rush fund center in front of my house, and it is. But that's where I choose to live. That's where I built my home. And so that's where I am. But I still understand that progress has to happen. But I would rather have affordable housing come in across the street from my house than a restaurant center. You know, and so I think we need to be really cognizant of that and taking care of the residents and the people that are potentially could come into this place because they want somewhere safe and somewhere nice to be as well. I do really value land, but I also understand people need a place to live. So I just wanted to clarify that. And also that the bid, it was not a bid, it was a projection. The bids go out later. That's why there has to be some flex in the money that we're talking about. And we want to have the architect plans continue so we can get a line like you asked for. We are really trying to look at suggestions of those that we represent. That's really important to us. We're not just out here trying to willy-nilly spend money. I wasn't even on the council that did the other two bonds, but I still want to use that money appropriately. It's money that's we already have, that we already paid for, and it would be kind of silly to lose that. And in my opinion, so I just felt like those were important things to bring up. Also, I do think that town councils or town hall meetings, something like that, are a great idea, so that we can have more actual communication. So thanks. Claire.
And because it's 9:15, I'm going to thank all of you for being here tonight, especially those that have to travel. Appreciate all your concern and help and your input in the city. And I'm going to call for a motion to adjourn. So, thanks.